And action.
And action.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to I don't remember my intro. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tori. And today I've really been looking forward to this discussion. And I know a lot of people who saw or knew of my review of Ship of Magic have also been really looking forward to this discussion. And who better to help me unpack my thoughts on a Robin Hobb novel than Derri, Queen of Hobb, as she is known everywhere on the internet.
Pretty much.
Derri, welcome to my channel.
Thank you, Tori. I'm Derri, and I have read this series so very much. That's why my channel is called Derri's Read It Before, because I have. And and when I say read it before, I'm talking literal dozens of times. So I very much wanted to sort of step in quite quickly in defense of Tori's response to the book, because it's totally valid. And I wanted to let her know that as soon as possible. Plus, also, Tori's kind of great. And this is my first time I get to talk to you one-on-one.
So excited.
Oh, loving that.
So we talked a little bit, kind of jumping right into we were talking a bit beforehand, and talk about the difference between fans and fandoms, and how, like, the discussion we're about to have, I'm really excited for, because I know there's going to be a lot of nuance and a lot of interesting points that I hadn't thought about, and maybe the chat hadn't thought about. And it's dare we say, a calm, mature discussion about a book that we have different opinions on the internet.
Or maybe
hold on,
calm, but it will be friendly.
It will be very expressive.
There's not going to be any aggression happening.
No.
But we're both reasonably passionate people, so it could get a bit army and hands.
Yes.
At some point,
especially when we talk about certain characters.
Yes, because even just very briefly touching on it earlier, and both of us were, So,
so to everyone in the chat, or if you're watching the replay, welcome. Settle in, grab a comfortable seat and a drink. Vero, we look forward to seeing you back on the replay when you come back. Thanks for joining us. Brian from BellTube. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Brian. Good to see you.
Mitch. Names will be called. Kyle, specifically.
Character names most definitely will be called out.
Yes. So. Hi, Kale. And we have Evie. I knew Evie was going to be in the chat. Hi, Evie. Evie's here for a brawl. She's used to our classics cage match discussions.
Oh, okay. Right. I see. But I'm not going to brawl Evie, because, the worst I'm ever going to get with any other reader is disappointed. Because, I'm not about aggression.
Me neither. I'm here for nuanced conversations with people that I like. So,
Absolutely.
So
to see blood. Oh, hey, we can all gang up on Kyle. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm
totally.
100. Like, I will bring the body bag, and you just tell me where.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so for anyone who I will discuss a little bit in the chat with Derri about my plans for the rest of the series and what I've decided, and my thoughts on this sentiment particularly, because I totally understand this sentiment where people are like, it's supposed to be, so we'll talk about that, I promise.
And as I mentioned in the comments to your review, is I'm not here to make Tori read the rest of the trilogy. I'm here to figure out what it was that is really triggering, and if it can be worked around. And you know what? If I don't think I can convince her it's a good idea, it's totally okay. I will cliff notes it, and she can go into Tawny Man with the information she needs.
Which I've been really excited for Tawny Man. So like, I am genuine, like, I will read more of Hobb. Like, that's not in question for sure. Hey, Daniel. This is absolute truth that I think we can all agree on, no matter what our opinions on this book.
Yeah.
But I did really appreciate, your comment. And there were so many Evie had a great comment. So many people that love this series had such incredibly encouraging comments under my review, which is something I really love about this corner of BookTube. Is I feel like this is the most rational corner of the internet, dare I say?
you may. My therapist isn't convinced that we exist, because when she heard that my BookTube people are my people and this is my community, and that I feel supported and all of this, she's like, on the internet?
On the what?
And I was like, yeah, they're my people. And she's like, and how does that work?
Right? I mean, I think it's just because all of us are, have a hopefully calm and adult-ish. I mean, I'm questionable.
Hey, Mitch is in the chat. We don't know about it.
We don't know. No. But we're able to have conversations where understanding that disagreeing isn't disrespect, right?
That's
like
right. And debate isn't a fight.
Exactly.
It's just a discussion.
I have so much respect for your love of it. I love seeing people passionate. So the fact that you are that as passionate as you are about Hobb, I love that. I love that. And I love experiencing your passion for Hobb, regardless of what my experience is. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. So, and this is, and we're talking about fans and fandoms, and it upsets me when somebody decides that they own loving a series so much that if you don't love it, there's something wrong with you. I'm so against that completely.
Me too.
Reading is such a personal experience. We all bring our own history to books, and I've said it to many people. We can all read the same words, but we're all reading a different story, because what we bring to it changes what we read. So how on earth could anybody judge a person for what they're getting from a story? I literally just don't understand that, how you can judge someone for that. I want people to come into Hobb and love it. And if somebody doesn't love it, I don't get angry. I get sad.
Right.
I wanted them to love it. And that's my reaction is, what did you struggle with? Thinking, is there anything I can help them with that potentially can take away this hurdle, this boundary that is stopping that enjoyment? It's not about forcing anyone to keep going because you've got to. No, I want you to enjoy it.
Right.
That's where I'm always coming from.
And we kind of mentioned this a little bit before the chat too, where we have similar protagonists in our favorite series. My favorite series of all time currently is Red Rising, and yours is Realm of the Elderlings. And Fitz and Darrow are both maddening idiots so often. Bless their hearts. But
we love them.
But we love them.
That's the heart of the story, really, isn't it? We love them.
And like, it's the same thing with Red Rising too. Like, I mean, that first book holds a lot of people up, and I completely understand when people are like, what? I happen to love it. Yeah. And I have so many thoughts about that. And you've been an inspiration to me, because I told somebody I was talking to yesterday, I was like, I want to be to Red Rising like Derri is to Hobb.
And like Evie is to
Simon Jimenez in general. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Those two things go together.
Those two things go together. And that, I love that. And, but again, if it's just not working for somebody, that's okay. And it's like you, I look for the why, because some of the whys are like, oh, yep, I don't know that that's going to get better for you. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, when was the first time you read Liveship Traders specifically? And do you remember your kind of first reading experience with it?
I sort of remember it in that it was way back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I had not long earlier finished Farseer and gone, this is amazing. Partly because this was the first series I had ever read that didn't reflect Tolkien at me. It was fresh. It had a new take on it, and it felt very different. And I just enjoyed that so much with Farseer. And then when I picked up Liveships, it's quite an odd beginning, because you begin. Hang on, spoilers? Yes, no. What are we doing with spoilers? I mean, I can be general for a long time,
yeah, let's
but
be
I'm going to need
let's
to know it's
be
eventually.
general for a little bit, and then towards the end, we are going to go full on spoilers for
Awesome.
Ship of Magic.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, it's not a spoiler. I mean, it's literally the first page.
Right.
You open with sea serpents.
Yeah.
And my brain kind of went, what?
Okay.
Okay. And for a lot of the Ship of Magic, I was thinking, why are they here?
Yeah.
They don't seem to be part of any of these storylines. And yet at the same time, I was like, well, they're bound to be included eventually. So, right. And I started looking for things that could be connecting. But it really threw me. And getting to know the live ships, I was like, oh, this is really clever. Mm-hmm. And I just was happy to be taken along this really strange set of magical rules. And I was like, I really like this. This is really fascinating. These people are horrible. Oh my God, I want to shake that one. She can get thrown out a window. And I just became so comfortable with the characters. I'm like, I know people like this. Mm-hmm. I've dealt with people like this. I have a family dynamic that's not dissimilar from this. Mm. So on one hand, it was very comfortable, very familiar. And on the other, it was very jarring because it was so outside what I knew.
Right.
In terms of a story. I had no clue where it was going. I was like, what are we even trying to achieve? Like, I don't know. But I was just happy to be taken on the journey.
Right.
And yeah, it's for me, it's such a strong trilogy in itself that if somebody doesn't want to read 16 books or doesn't always read fantasy, I have been known to recommend it as a standalone trilogy.
Right.
So it's,
Right. Yeah. And I know like I know that there are a lot of different schools of thoughts on what to start with.
Oh, yes. I would never. I know that's a hill I will die on. You do not start the Realm of the Elderlings with Live Ships. But right. If you're never going to read Realm of the Elderlings, Live Ships is valid as a trilogy.
Right. So, yeah. Because it's a closed circuit.
Yeah. It's its own story. And everybody in it is new if you have read the first trilogy, and any tie-ins that you get to Farseer are thematic rather than overtly spoilery.
Right.
So you can read it as a standalone trilogy. So.
Yeah. It was interesting because I think we mentioned earlier too, like that those early series that really have a strong emotional impact on us, that really grab us and kind of change the way we see a genre we already love. I think when I read Ship of Magic, like I said earlier, also factors into how I felt about it. Because if I look back at where I was at in my own healing journey in my early 20s, 10 plus years ago, when I read Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson, I needed desperately to be seen by a character in a story, right? And that's where Fellison came in, and it totally blew my mind that some author understood that trauma wasn't always pretty. It wasn't always the TED Talk,
And the response can be ugly, and it can be damaging, and it can last so much longer than people think.
Right.
And it can so deeply impact a person that the person they were before isn't savable. They're gone, and they have to start again.
Right.
And that's one of the wonderful things that I found with Live Ships and all of Realm of the Elderlings is everything Robin Hobb's characters go through stays with them. And so you see different ways of trauma response. You see people who react in a healthy way and promote their own healing and do really well. And you see other people react in ways that aren't healthy and in ways that hurt themselves.
Right.
But those things are real, and
very
everybody
real.
Could have that reaction. All of those reactions are valid. So to see that in so many facets, and to be sad that some people couldn't heal in a way that was healthy for them, and you're like, oh, you could have done that better,
right?
And it's really affected your life from there on. or to see somebody do really well. And you're like, I'm so proud of this character. They've managed to do this. It's so true to life.
It is. Yeah.
And that's the joy I get in reading these books, is that everybody who has had any kind of trauma hopefully will find a character in Hobb who has gone through it and is finding ways past it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And everybody needs that.
They do. And I think, like, and I will get to this when we get to spoilers, there is a character in Ship of Magic that I'm pretty sure I mentioned to you that was like, every time I got to this character's sections, it was like a breath of relief, which says a lot about me as a person when you find out which character that was.
Exactly.
But, yeah, it's fine. Trauma things, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think, like, one of the things that I was nervous about when I posted my review is, in the past, when I have had issues with certain traumatic events in stories, one of the comebacks that can be utilized is, well, you're just sensitive.
Oh, yes. You're taking it too personally.
Yeah. And
I want to shake those people.
I'm like, my favorite fantasy book is Dead House Gates, for crying out loud. Like, and it's not a badge of honor, right? It's not a badge of honor to be like, I can read anything in a fantasy book and be totally fine.
Yeah. If anything, it's a mark against you, because
I'm like,
should affect you emotionally.
You
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you had, I know, because I was reading your comments, ready to jump to your defense, and people saying, you know, it's an extreme reaction and this, but you're supposed to have it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that, yes, you are. And I can absolutely understand why having that reaction to too much of an extent becomes the barrier. And that, no, this has actually hit me too hard. Right. And no.
Yeah,
I get that.
I need some,
yeah,
it's because at this point, like, I'm very much in a point of healing where I can look in a mirror, right? And I can confront, why am I having these reactions? And I can actually think through them, because therapy.
Therapy. We're all here for therapy. It's all good.
100%. And that's been an incredibly useful set of coping mechanism tools. And what I found in Ship of Magic was, at the beginning, it was just like, oh, okay, yep, it's Hobb, and we're kind of, and we're because it's very different tone than Farseer.
And it does have a very different tone. You're quite right.
And you know, the serpents, I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I like that. All right, let's go. And first of all, the live ships are such a brilliant world. I love that. I love it so much. I think it's brilliant. I love that concept. And then, like, everything just kind of went to crap. And
hang on.
I don't expect, like, I know Hobb well enough, having been through the Farseer trilogy, that I was not expecting sparkles and butterflies the whole time by any means. But it just, like I mentioned in my review, it just kind of felt like this. We were rolling down a hill of trauma, and there was no break, and there was no stop, and there was no moment of normalcy. And I felt like, for an opening book in a trilogy, that's a lot of trust to ask of a reader. And I feel like, and maybe it's just been there was a lot of space in between me finishing Farseer and starting Live Ships, which may have contributed something to that. Yes. But I was like, I don't know that I trust you that much. Like, hold on. That's a lot. And it just started to feel like, and I hesitated saying this in my review too, but it started to feel like misery porn after a while, because it was just like, and then this horrible off every single page. And then there was literally a scene where something awful just continued to happen. And then it started raining. And I was like, of course it did. Of course it did. Of course it rained. And I just was so done at that point that I was like, I'm gonna finish this book, dang it. And that was the last 40% of the book for me. And this is where it comes down to, yes, we're setting up a lot of stuff, and that is the most back-to-back that we get in terms of negative things. Right. That's not to say it's all sweetness and light from here on. Right. This is still Hobb, let's face it. But it does begin to be interspersed with things changing.
and that, okay, we've hit our low point here. We're at the absolute nadir of the story. Everybody's at base zero. From here, where do we go?
Where do we go?
What are our options? What are we going to achieve? And some of those choices are great, and some of those choices are not great. And some of those choices are great, but the way they do it aren't great. So because she writes people exceptionally well.
Yes.
And we're not great. We can think we're doing something really smart, but there'll be things that we haven't factored in because we're human.
Yep.
And she puts those in her books. So you're like, oh, that's a wonderful plan. And then something will happen outside everybody's control that just completely puts the kibosh on everything. You're like, seriously?
Yeah.
But you can't even argue it because you're like, well, yeah, that is actually kind of what is likely to happen.
Right. Right.
So I totally am with the sense of I can't take any more doom and despair and just shit going wrong. I just need something that isn't awful.
Somewhere. Yeah.
Please, for Christ's sake, something.
Yeah.
And so then that's why I sort of said, my aim isn't to go, no, you need to keep going. Is to go, okay, how much of this is a very personal reaction to particular characters? How much of this is, I actually need this to be a bit lighter to find some enjoyment?
Right.
And how much of this is, I'm just not enjoying it. I don't want to know what happens next.
Right.
And go from there. Because all of those things are valid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm still figuring out to some degree where, because, you know, I've learned, okay, when you have a really strong reaction to something, we stop, we acknowledge that it's there. Okay. That's one of the most important coping mechanisms that I have learned. Acknowledge it. Like, all you have to do is acknowledge it. You don't have to jump into the pool. Like, just
no, you just go, oh yeah, okay, that's that big pile of crap.
I'm feeling things. Yeah. And there was a point, I think I was in denial a little bit at the beginning, because I got about, honestly, I'll say which scene it was, but it was very early on. It's the ship peg scene in the very beginning of the book, where I was like, I'm starting to feel like a resistance here. But I just thought, you know, okay, but I'm just upset because I knew that I saw this coming, and it's going to be whatever. It's going to be fine, I told myself at that point. And
it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Just to let it wasn't.
It wasn't.
That did not go well.
No, and I think there came a point, and I mentioned this in my review too, that you know, there's a level of gaslighting specifically in this book, and I assume series, from what I've heard, that is something that I am specifically very resistant to. Not even resistant in a bad way, but like, I don't want to spend a lot of time in that, because I have, you know?
Yeah. And I get that.
Yeah.
You know, it's really not a nice place to be.
It's not, it's like a trauma bath that you can't get out of.
That's right. And we mentioned this briefly before we went live, is that when we encounter people who go, I didn't even see that. I didn't see that. I didn't see any gaslighting.
Which is,
do you know what? Your life must be just lovely, and you must have a lovely family, and bloody good for you, because not everyone gets that.
Right.
For me, I'm like, no, this is a thing that people have lived with. And I liked, and this is, you know, the difference in the way you respond to it. Again, I've read it a lot, so I kind of sanded a lot of the rough edges off my own response by now, is that a lot of people don't understand how prevalent gaslighting is in so many relationships, and they don't recognize it in real life. So I like that it's in this series. I like that it highlights,
it's an important discussion,
the manipulation and the abuse of trust that comes of it, because for me, it's important for those who haven't experienced it to understand that this is a thing, and it's hurtful, and it does so much damage. So it's and
I think the word that I kept coming back to and trying to I've been working on therapy tips with Tori and Derri. I've been
go to therapy if you don't already, because it's amazing.
Tip number 1. But I've been working really hard on articulating what feelings are, like whatever feeling I'm feeling, and working really hard on acknowledging, okay, what exactly is it? And, and
you're not really angry. Something has frightened
something's
me
underneath that.
So
yeah.
why am I frightened of this thing? Why do I want that to go away?
Because I started getting this, like I had to be totally raw and honest, I had a very physical reaction reading this book. Like I was sitting in my bed reading this, and I got high temperature sweats, and I was like, okay, so I'm having a trauma response to this thing. Where is that coming from? And what I found was I kept coming back to was I felt like I was trapped in 800 pages of pure helplessness.
Yes.
And that is not a place I ever want to be in my life again.
Yep.
And it felt like I was trapped there. Like there was no relief. There was no coming up for air. It was just that overarching feeling for 800 pages.
Because she hasn't shown you a light. We don't even have the option of the light being a train at the end of the tunnel, because there's no light.
Right.
And that can be too much.
Right.
Frankly. One of the reasons I think that it does impact us so profoundly is that, unlike a lot of other fantasy books that I've read, Hobb doesn't necessarily tell you specifically about things that are happening, but she tells you how people are feeling about the things that are happening around them. And somehow it makes an experience much more visceral to read, because you share those emotions with the characters. So somehow, even when it's not graphic, you're somehow more present in it than if somebody had been describing something word for word, blow for blow.
Right.
Because then you're just sort of imagining a scene.
Right.
But when you're given those emotions, you are in it.
Right.
When you're told that it's frightening, or that you feel scared, or that it's given the character chills, or all of the things, it's just a different experience. So 100%. While Robin Hobb doesn't get called grimdark, there are definitely instances where, well, it's kind of valid,
kind of, sort of, just
because it doesn't have
it's emotional
and exploding brains.
It's emotional grimdark.
Very devastating to be in those moments. It's a very different reading experience for a lot of fantasy readers, because not a lot of authors take this approach.
Right.
And that can be too much if you're not ready for it.
If you're not. And I think, talking about expectations too, like going in to this particular trilogy, a lot of people said, knowing me as a reader, this is going to be your favorite. This is going to be your favorite. Because based on what we know you love, read some
these elements,
some emotional trauma and I'm like, yes, but I like to read it in a different way. And I've worked really hard, because I kept going back to, this is so weird, because I love books that deal with trauma. All of my favorite books are just full of those. So I was like, where is that? And I think we really touched on a big point is, I like to be invited into the story as an observer, right? Because that's safer.
That's right.
Right.
And it's not so confronting.
Exactly.
And I doesn't give you that leeway. She doesn't allow you to remain separate. She's like, no, you're going to live this.
You're going to be in it.
That's
right.
Too much, especially for those of us who have been through trauma instances that are similar to this, because she does write them particularly well.
She does.
And she does get that emotional response right. So it can be really, really upsetting to read, even if the scene itself doesn't overtly appear to be upsetting. Because she's written it well enough that she's like, no, this is a moment of manipulation, and this is a moment of control, and this is a moment where this person has no agency.
Right.
And it can read very blandly if you aren't aware of that level of manipulation.
Or such a slow burn. There's nothing really happening. It's like,
there's a lot going on. And if you recognize it,
it's exhausting.
That can be a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to point out too, Evie had a great comment. Reading the gaslighting manipulation was oddly cathartic for me because of my past not being the gaslighter or manipulator, to be clear. And I think this just highlights again, like Derri and I were talking about earlier and before the live stream, it just again goes to show how people who have multiple people who've experienced gaslighting are going to read that book and have different responses to it.
Yeah.
Because trauma is such an individual, just like reading is an individual. So you have an individual experience of storytelling, and you have an individual experience of trauma and healing journey. And you put those two things together and it's even more profoundly individual.
That's right. Not least of which is you add in where in your healing journey you are and what point you need these elements. Right. Because having read these as many times as I have, I can tell you my experience of reading them changes as I've got older, because I've reached different points in my healing journey, and things that didn't bother me before bother me a different time, and things that bothered me a while ago no longer bother me. And so and that really can only happen when an author has put that situation succinctly with some real intelligence around, this is 100%. What this moment is, and now you can have, now I've given you this experience, whether you've had one or not, now you know what it feels like. And as I say, depending on where you are, that's not a pleasant experience.
No. And that's where, like, you know, as I have learned, I'm learning to set boundaries even with the books that I read, right?
Which is so healthy.
Which is so healthy.
It's hard to find.
It is. And that's why I encourage people who are completionists. I'm not a completionist. It does bother me. Like, if I were to never finish Liveship Traders, it would bug me, because I'm like, but I want to know, I want to be able to discuss the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, whenever I run across people that are really struggling with a book and they're just like feeling a lot of emotions, struggling with it, it's like, please allow yourself to put it down. Give yourself that space, because you can always come back to it if you feel, you know, more able.
That's exactly it. And
it's not like it's disappearing.
That's right. Still going to be there.
Still going to be there.
If at the end of this discussion I say to you, I'm just going to cliff notes it, come back to it later, it's with the understanding that at some point you're going to have reached a point in your own healing where you can come back to it later, and you will get the power of the story in its entirety without that emotional trauma to go with it. And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, that's a totally valid reading experience.
Right.
So long as I've given you what you need to move forward into Tawny Man, and you'll get all the references, because I want you to love Tawny Man, then I'll have done my job. You know,
I'm so ready.
Yeah. And because these are difficult books. You know, we talked about Stephen Erickson and the Books of the Fallen, and they're well known as, you know, they're difficult books. There's a lot of in them. They're going to expect quite a lot of you as a reader. For some reason, Hobb doesn't get that same level of,
she will from me,
respect in terms of this could be challenging.
Yes.
And that, you know, people know Hobb writes depressing. It's depressing, so depressing. I'm a depressed person. They are not depressing. But they are work. They do take effort. They take energy to read, because they don't let you keep any distance from people. They don't let you watch from the sidelines. And that's an important thing to know, I think, going into these books.
Right. Yeah. I definitely did not have that expectation. I was like, okay, the live ships, and there's going to
be exciting. It'll be,
and I'm going to hate, pirates, and I'm going to hate Kyle. Let's go. Like, that was my, absolutely, you know, and I was definitely, that was not what I was expecting. I did not expect it to, and hit me that hard. And I think I was thinking about the way that I input emotional impact, because I'm a very emotional impact moment writer. I'm a very emotional impact moment reader, watcher of film. Like, I love those things.
Yes.
And I think what I was recognizing is, to me, I need a little bit of this.
Yes.
Right.
And it was just slightly too much of this and not enough of that.
Yeah. And I feel like those moments of normalcy and those little moments at rest and those like other events or themes or elements that kind of break it up slightly, that when I get to one of those huge emotional moments, I trust the author to punch me in the gut at that point. Like I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. And I build that trust with the writer through the story. Hobb expected, I think, at this point, more trust than I can give her.
Yeah. And hey, and that's perfectly fair. I think part of it is there's an element of reality, which sounds so bizarre when you're talking about a fantasy series, but there is an element of reality that there are points in your life that feel like that.
Yeah.
That feel like every day just the same shit, and it just gets 100%. Worse and it just gets worse. And there are no, as you say, moments of normality.
Yeah.
And I think that for many people who maybe haven't experienced times like that, you're reading Ship of Magic going, what the hell is wrong with this woman? Why is this all just negative? Sometimes it is. Sometimes life is like that, where you just get hit after hit after hit.
Yep.
And just like real life, sometimes when you get something good, it doesn't work out as a good thing.
Right.
It can be, okay, I managed to get signed on to this new ship, as we get for Althea at one point, and you're like, yay, okay. You're like, oh, she got a job. Yeah. Because this happens sometimes. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then that will happen, and then this will happen. But in reality, you'll go, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Oh.
About face.
Okay. I need to find a different way of dealing with this now, because it isn't what I expected. It isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And a bit like with the gaslighting, I like that she puts those elements in her book because they are true to life.
Yeah.
You do have to be flexible enough in your thinking to roll with those punches sometimes.
Right.
Because sometimes to stand and resist it is too hard. Sometimes you just have to go with it. And that's kind of where I ended up falling with Ship of Magic, of going, okay, I'm just going to roll with this because I don't really have any option. And I didn't have as visceral a reaction as you did. So it meant that I did go into Madship on a, I won't say positive note, because it's pretty grim. By the end of it, you're like, oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot to do.
So glad that's over.
Yeah, there's a lot to come back from.
Yeah.
And it did have a very different feel for me going into Madship, in that now everybody's at the bottom. Everything from here is, okay, we can only move forward. And where they go in Madship is another one of those expectation doesn't meet reality. And some of it's good and some of it's not as good. But they are all eventually reached a point where they can make decisions and move in a direction they've chosen.
Right.
Which was missing in Ship of Magic. They were just responding. They were all reacting to what was happening around them.
Right.
So, yeah, it was, it does feel as a shift in tone.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did want to mention too, I think one of the comments that I got a lot under the review that I wanted, it doesn't specifically have to do with Ship of Magic, but I think it's a really important point to touch on before we get into, I want to get a little bit to some of the chat points, because there were some really good comments in here. And then we're going to just go full spoilers and we're going to dig in. There were a lot of people that were either thanking me or surprised or whatever, mixture of emotions or commentary on me doing a honest review of a book I didn't like, that wasn't like trashing it. And I am really thankful that everyone got that out of it, because that was the intent. And I think it's really important. I've done a few reviews now for books that were not good experiences for me. And I think honesty is really important. I don't ever want to be like, I loved it when I didn't, because that's not honest, and that's not who I want to be as a person. But I also think there's a way to do that isn't, everything I said in my review, I would say to Robin Hobb's face.
Yeah.
And
she would take it as
right.
an honest reaction to her book. And
right.
I'm speaking for myself, who has never met Robin Hobb, I genuinely think she would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because I'm positive is what she wanted. She wanted that emotional investment where it felt personal.
Yeah.
She wants it to feel personal.
Right.
And that was unpleasant just meant she got it exactly right, really.
Right.
Because you know what that feels like. And that too close. That was didn't want to go there again.
Right.
So it worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it did.
It's one of those rare occasions where it's actually worked too well.
Right.
And put you back into a moment where your body has just freaked out and gone,
right. Nope. Boundary.
A hard boundary. And there is literally not a more valid reason to go, didn't enjoy that.
Right. No, I didn't. I can't say that I enjoyed this book. No. I can say that I think that Robin Hobb is a brilliant writer. I can say that I think that she is doing a really good job writing insufferable characters.
Oh, yes.
Because she's excellent at it. And really so many of them at the same time. Like there's usually one or two or a couple or a group, like small group of insufferable characters, but when it's just like every POV, you're just like, and all right.
And you suck.
You suck too.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's impressive, honestly.
It kind of is. And even, I don't know if it's a little bit spoilery, I'm not sure, but even Wintro, who almost everybody adores at the beginning of the Ship of Magic, you get to a point with him and you're like, could you stop being so holier than thou? Get off your freaking high horse, kid. And so for when even the sweetest character that we've met so far gets that annoying, you're just like, okay, that takes some skill.
Yeah,
because he does annoy me, but by the end of Ship of Magic, I'm just like, oh, kid.
Oh, I have things to say about Wintro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring that up though, because I really appreciated the discussion under that video, and Derri obviously was a big part of that, and just everyone was it was such a lovely group of comments to read through, and it was really wonderful.
I'm glad that you got that response. I really am, because as you said, it can be a bit frightening to put a potentially negative thing out there about a series that is as loved as this one. So I was really proud of everybody for going, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. And I appreciated that.
It was really good.
I mean, I didn't say my thoughts on negative thoughts on a Sanderson book, so I said what I said. So
we can just feel superior as Hobb fans. We're the nicest ones.
Yeah,
so
nice.
Yeah, we're the nicest ones.
Yeah,
we've been taught by Robin Hobb. You see, you have to be gracious for people,
right?
You have to be gracious and let people have their trauma.
Before anybody runs away with that, I do really enjoy quite a few of Sanderson's books, so I'm not dissing Sanderson at all, but the fandom sometimes. Woo!
Yeah, they can take it in the bit in their mouths and run with it for sure.
Daniel says, I liked Liveship best of all the Elderling series, but I read them straight in a row and do not remember what is in one versus the other. Maybe I didn't particularly like the first one either. No idea. They're definitely not, like, even from the first one, it's very clear to me that they're written as a set of three. Like, it's
one big story that just has breaks.
Right.
And it's cleverly done to some extent in that each section of the books is given a season. So we start, I think, in summer, and then you get autumn, and then you get winter. So it's telling you this is a continuous timeline. We're not getting time jumps. We're not moving away and doing something else. This is the story from the beginning, and this is the same timeline until we finish.
Right.
So it feels very much like that when you read it. This is just one story.
Right. So. Mother Superior is I love that. The Hobb Mother Superior.
Well, I don't know about superior. I don't necessarily think I'm superior to anyone. Reading as many times as I have could be seen as some kind of illness. I mean,
it
kind of depends, really.
At 33, and I just started my 6th reread of Red Rising.
You've got a ways to go.
But I understand. I get it. It's like, I just read
Sometimes
this, but I want to read it again. Yeah. Yep.
Sometimes it just speaks to you, and it does it in a way that touches your heart, and you're like, no, I need to read this some more.
Yeah.
And I haven't reached a point where I've read it and not found something new.
Right.
I think if that day ever came, I would maybe stop rereading. I might have to read it twice without.
I was going to say, I'll believe it when I see it, Derri.
But there's so much in it that I haven't yet had that experience. And it's definitely helped by talking to a reader like yourself, Tori, who brings a very different point of view to it and says, I actually really struggled with this because, and then I can read it and go, oh yeah, this is actually heavier than I realized. Yeah. And this is actually much more prevalent than I realized. And oh yeah. And I'll notice it more, and I'll notice other characters' reactions to it more. And I've had that with almost every single discussion I've had with everybody about this series. Everybody has given me something to look for in the next time I read it. And so BookTube has enriched my Hobb journey so much. I can't even tell you. Yeah. And I wouldn't have thought that was possible before I found BookTube. But it is.
There's so much that, you know, we as one person can only experience a certain amount of the world. And it's such a beautiful thing that we're able to connect with other people and share their experience of the world at the same time. And that just expands so much your own, which is lovely.
It does. I've said it's the books recommending people. People often will recommend a book to someone they know because they're like, oh no, you'll enjoy this, because when I see a stranger reading a book I love, I know there's going to be something about that person that I'm going to connect with.
Right. You have something in common.
Exactly. So books like this recommend other people.
Yes.
So
yep.
It's always when I hear someone who likes them, I'm like, oh, okay, we can be friends.
We're friends.
Just, without any more than that. That's enough.
Well, when you read, when you have that kind of a depth of love for a series, which I can understand as well, like the characters become part of your family. Like these are people that you know as well as you can on pages of a story. Like they come to life for you as much as they did for the author, which is sometimes great and sometimes depending on the character.
Yeah, very much so.
Chris Navo says, we'll catch this playback. Tori, just watch your Ship of Magic review. I think this is the first book I had a conflicting opinion on with you, but I can also understand your points. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Because I know that Chris had quite a good time reading through.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to talk to him personally as he finished, but I'm pretty sure I remember following him through in the chats, and he did enjoy his journey.
And that makes me I love that. That's awesome. Love that. I said that quite a few times in my comments under the video too, that like when people had completely opposite reactions, I was like, that's awesome that you had such a, fabulous experience with it. I love that for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in a way that's like, patronizing at all.
Yeah. I'm not being ironic here. I'm actually being genuine,
genuinely, I'm happy for you.
I'm pleased that you've enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate that. I try really hard. So I'm a Slytherin. So I work very hard to say nice things.
It doesn't come naturally, clearly. So, whereas I'm a Ravenclaw with Slytherin tendencies, I will far more likely to say nice things with a bite. And just be like, well, that was lovely. There's and this is why it's really important that we get reviews about books that do point out the things that are confronting, that point out the things that can be difficult, and can point out things that other readers haven't noticed.
Right.
Because that was my thing, in that unless somebody says this level of gaslighting is triggering, I'm not going to take that into account because I didn't find it that triggering.
Right.
I'm not going to think about it and say, oh, Tori, you might struggle with this because it's quite manipulative. And so I need to know, as somebody who loves these books, I need to know about experiences that don't match mine.
Right.
Because I do.
It's just something I need to know.
I just need to know because because I want so many people to love it, and I don't want to give a book to somebody and not realize. Like, I felt awful when I heard your experience had been so traumatic. I felt awful. I was like, oh, I wish it's just so not what I want for people.
Yeah.
Like, well, now I know that if I'm talking to somebody who I know has issues around, gaslighting and these sort of trauma things, I know to say this might be too much.
Mm-hmm.
Put it down if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Ring, message, whatever, because it's there, and I'll know to do that now. So
yeah. Well, and I was just thinking, I was like, what an experience it would have been to have like curled up on the proverbial couch in a hoodie with Derri on the other end, also reading a different Hobb book, probably. And like just talk
as
through
you go.
it. Like, yeah, because I think that would have been really, and that's the other thing is that I started vlogging this. I was going to vlog it, and I felt bad because I had told a few people I was going to vlog it, and I was like, okay, I'm respecting myself enough to know this is not something I want to vlog because I'm in the middle of the initial feelings and I don't want to put that on camera, and I will do a review afterwards. But I had some initial conversations through the book. I had a couple of friends that I was ranting a bit to. You need
to when it's affecting you like that. You have to have somebody who can listen.
It's so isolating, and I didn't want it to stay that way because I knew that that wasn't healthy.
No, and really good on you. I'm really proud of you for that.
Therapy.
But it's important because especially when, as an author, you're looking at it, able to see the technical proficiency that's happening. So know on an objective level that what you're reading is good.
Well, that's
and so you know that you're bringing the emotional negativity to it. And you're like, okay.
And do I think that
need to unpack
time, like objectively, does Robin Hobb ask for a lot of trust on a first book? Yes, 100%.
Yes,
so I can see where, from a writing perspective, that is a huge risk. Yes. And I understand that. And it's not going to work for some people because of that. And, authors make structure choices all the time, and how many people, even who love certain series, will immediately say, well, I didn't like, they did this one thing and I can totally understand why people don't like that or whatever. Those are risks that we have to take in our books. And I took some risks in Bloodstones, and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't, depending on the reader. And that's totally normal. But objectively, I can still look at it and say, I respect how real these characters are because
they're pretty real.
They are very real.
Pretty in your face.
She got a great Minnesotan oofda from me a couple of times.
She's well, I mean, I've read them so many times. The fact that they can still bring me to ugly crying. Tells you that these words remain powerful. She's able to put you in this so deeply. You can't even tell yourself what's about to happen because you're in it. And I'm proper. I'm not a pretty crier.
I'm not either.
Never have been. And Hobb has made me ugly cry like nobody has ever been able to. And what's quite entertaining, and I'm sure you'll have encountered it as well from Alan, he's like, don't tell me you cried, it means someone dies. And for Hobb,
not always,
not the case.
No,
she can make you ugly cry for some oddly happy things. So again, it takes talent. So I very much see this as overly successful.
I'm a success. Oh, good.
Absolutely. Just a little bit too much. But that's
too much. Yeah.
Well, was there any character at all that you enjoyed, even if you hated them? Who did you enjoy?
Well, I mean, as I said in my review, my favorite character of the book was Paragon, bar none. There was nobody even close. Nobody even close to Paragon. And more spoilers on that later. I liked Brashen. Brashen was like, okay, we were okay with Brashen. Mostly. You know.
He's not perfect.
No. Wintro in the beginning I thought was going to be my favorite character.
A lot of people do.
And I'm trying to think if I really quickly, I want to get to a couple comments before I get super spoiler on characters. And I promise I will say everything. So hi Grifkin. Thanks for joining us. Daniel agrees. I totally agree. It's emotional grimdark. There's different types of grimdark. Much so. It's a tone, but that tone can apply to multiple types of storytelling, whether it's military or emotional, like Hobb is doing more of a emotional trauma kind of thing. Hi, Shad. Brian hit the nail on the head. Sometimes it's weird how well my friends know my reading tastes. You guys are scary. The removal of agency is a huge something that I really
and it's definitely a theme, like a big theme in the trilogy.
Huge
so
theme.
It's not even like you can kind of go, okay, I don't have to pay too much attention to that.
Right. No, it's everywhere.
It's there. Yeah.
I agree with you, Evie. And this is one of the things that I wanted to touch on, because I've read other books that made me so angry because they fetishize trauma, and it makes me so mad. And there are books that I will not even mention on my channel because of that makes me so, this is not that case. And that's why I hesitated so much with using the phrase misery porn with Robin Hobb, because I was like, but it's not. It feels like it is, but I understand, like, this isn't, she actually understands trauma, and she's doing a very good job portraying what it feels like to be in these kind of situations. And so I totally agree with you, Evie.
Yeah.
Swashbuckling was something that I was kind of looking for, but not like, I didn't think I was like, oh, this is going to be a swashbuckly, like,
no, but you kind of hope for a little bit of, gung-ho piracy, because
I mean, I'm hoping for it even more now. I need some, fencing duels would be great. Let's see. I liked Farseer, but hated Liveship Traders, and since finishing that trilogy,
definitely continue in that Tawny Man comes back to Fitz in a first-person perspective, and the events that have occurred in live ships are very relevant to the story, but aren't really a part of the story. So you need live ships for that context, but it's very much back to Fitz. We're back in Fitz's world. We're back in that writing style, and it's a culmination of events of the two previous trilogies. Definitely continue. After Tawny Man, come back to me, and I can talk to you about Rain Wilds and whether or not you need to keep going, because you might be happy finishing at the end of Tawny Man. But definitely read Tawny Man. So,
Evie. Yep.
There you go.
Evie doing her apprentice work in the chat.
Yeah, sister Hobb fan. Absolutely. There you go. Tawny Man, more Farseer. Yep.
So I wish I felt more emotional in my reading, but I definitely remember the heaviness. It is so, that's a great word. It's very heavy. It's so heavy.
Yeah.
Hey, John, how's it going? Let's see. Shad says, Derri, you're the nicest one. Hey, Andrew. Andrew was one of the saintly souls who was listening to all of my in medias res thoughts.
And I'm incredibly grateful to him for helping you through that, because it's a lot.
Yeah,
it is a lot.
I mentioned this, I think, to you when we first started talking. Pete from Ponderings of Pete. Everybody to go subscribe to Pete.
Pete's a darling.
He's wonderful. And he was like, if you don't message Derri, I'm messaging Derri.
Yeah. I had a great deal of fun when Pete read Live Ships, because he got to a point where he had a daily killing of this character, and he would come up with a really bizarre way he was going to kill this character. And I got to the point where I looked forward to that every day. Was Pete coming on and telling us how he was going to kill this character.
Love that.
These days. And that's one of the things that about BookTube that is so incredible is this community when you're reading, where you can be with somebody as they enjoy something, you can help people through the challenging reads, and you can be there to say, just put it down. Just put it down. Yep. It's okay. Nobody's going to send you to jail for not finishing this book.
No.
Put it down. And sometimes you need that. You need people to go, why are you torturing yourself? Put it down.
Well, and it's, you know, when we're all very busy on BookTube and we all subscribe to, we have so many wonderful people on here and we subscribe to so many channels. It's impossible to keep up with everybody's videos. And I had people coming on in the comments, you know, like a lot of people that specifically commented on this video that are friends of mine that were like, so I don't know if you like, and you know, it's not the first time somebody's been like, I don't think you're going to like that. It was like genuine, legitimate concern about me continuing. And I, the tone shift from what I'm used to when people say, I don't think you're going to like that, was really telling to me. Yes. And I do trust my friends enough to say, okay, hold on. I might want to like really actually think about this for a second.
Yeah.
But let's see, Daniel, I have a couple authors, like Gene Wolfe is one of my authors like that. Let's see, but I do like Gaiman. Yeah.
Hey, we can thank Neil Gaiman for all of Discworld. So I will always be a fan of Neil Gaiman.
I read my first Discworld this year as well. Guards, and I loved it. Loved it.
And you're going to love Men at Arms even more.
So, Derri, when I tell you that Carrot might be my favorite character of the year so far, I love him so much.
I have a tingling head hearing that.
I love him so much.
Literally, the hair on my body has risen. And because I don't have much on my head, it literally makes my head tingle. And my head is tingling at the thought that you like that so much.
I do.
You are going to love Men at Arms.
I'm so excited. I want to take Carrot and put him in a little blanket burrito and feed him hot chocolate and put him in my pocket. That's how I feel about it.
Carrot is amazing.
Carrot's amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
Let's see.
I mean,
Derri's reading Dresden Files. Friendship Aloud. Nice.
Yeah, I think I'm on my 4th read, and I credit Jake Bishop for that one. I really struggled with getting into Dresden Files. I didn't like the main character. I was like, I really don't like this guy, and everybody's saying, but you'll love it. It'll be great. And I'm like, I'm not enjoying this. And Jake said to me, have you tried the audiobooks? I was like, no, I haven't. He says, try the audiobooks. Next minute, I've done all of them. I did the last dozen, I think, in like 10 days. I was like, oh, okay, I'm on it.
Wow.
And now I'm listening again, and I think I've done the first dozen again inside about 12 days. Because they're just so much fun.
The audiobook can really make a big, that was one thing.
It really can.
I did listen to, I was driving and I listened to, I think, 2 chapters of Ship of Magic on audiobook. And I had no idea. I know now, but like I had no idea. This is my perspective for anyone who has not read Liveship. Please do not listen to that audiobook. I was like,
I am happy to be quoted on this. The audio of Liveships is an abomination and should be nuked off the planet. It is horrible.
Heard it here first, folks. I agree.
And if you haven't read it with your eyeballs, where you can forgive poor narration on a reread, it will negatively impact your experience of this story. And I don't want that to you. I don't want that. I don't want that for anyone. I really don't.
I will say, Amber, in a little bit. I have things about that too, Andrew.
It has to be last. Might be here a while.
I might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you mentioned in the sharing an editor, this is something that I think does not get talked about enough. And I may even do, because I've also read A Song of Ice and Fire, and I may do a video talking about the similarities between.
You're not allowed. I've already talked to Jimmy, and I'm having that discussion with Jimmy shortly.
I will
so
not
you might have to join us instead. You may have to join us instead.
That would be fun.
Because that's a thing.
That'd be fun. Oh, 100%. That, because a lot of that same, it was a similar heaviness that I felt in reading Song of Ice and Fire. And I actually didn't enjoy A Song of Ice and Fire as much as a lot of people did, for the same reason that I'm having a hard time with Hobb in some ways. So I totally agree. Let's see. Redeemed with the... I know, you know what? The Gene Wolfe fans just don't, like, this at this point. I'm not a Gene Wolfe fan. Yeah, Carrot's amazing. Hey, Andrew.
Good to see you.
I love this comment so much.
He is.
I'm going to say that from now on. If somebody asks me who my favorite dwarf in fantasy is, I'm going to say Carrot. Yeah, absolutely.
Because being a dwarf has nothing to do with height.
No, it's what's in your heart.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we're getting to the bottom. I just wanted to make sure. Yes, guards. I loved it. It's going to be in my...
having fun?
Yes.
Oh, I hope so.
I hope so too. That's going to be in my... I will be shocked if that's not in my top 10.
Trisha will enjoy the guards books because they are mysteries. They are police procedurals. And so there's an element there that I think as a mystery author, she's going to really, really enjoy.
Okay, I think I'm to the bottom. So I'm going to put a banner on the bottom now, because we are going no holds barred now. We can say whatever we want about Ship of Magic. And there will be some things that I'm aware of in the upcoming books already that I was told by well-meaning friends.
Necessary trigger warnings.
Yes. And also things about certain characters that I knew going into the series.
And this is what good friends do.
Yes.
Okay. If you know somebody around you who will be negatively impacted by things in a book that you know they're about to read, you tell them.
Yes.
You don't let them go in blind.
Yes. So I'm giving it, there's a few people that are leaving us goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us, and
cheers, Griffin.
Come back and watch the rest of it when you've read Liveship Traders.
Absolutely.
If you want
See
to
you, Kyle.
Okay. So where should we start, Derri? You said Paragon. Well, let's start with Paragon, because he was my favorite. Yes. I would read the entire trilogy just for Paragon.
Yep.
Just for Paragon.
This is an objectively correct opinion.
Thank you.
Paragon is the best one.
He's and it was funny because you know how we talked about the undercurrent before, and how like I walked onto that beach with Kenneth and I was like, nope.
Don't know about you.
Don't know about you. As soon as Paragon showed up, I was like, this character has been hurt so badly by people he trusted. And it is like, I don't care that everyone thinks it's his fault.
Like,
I don't believe it.
This is a broken character. This is a broken person who nobody has helped heal.
Yes.
And he's just been abandoned to his brokenness.
Yes.
And my heart went out to him straight away.
Yes.
I was like, I want to hug this boat.
I need that quote that I want to hug this boat.
I did. I just
I
wanted to hug him.
Well, and like the thing with Paragon is knowing immediately reading his first section, I was like, whatever happened, it wasn't like he may have been involved somehow, but it wasn't his fault. And
he was a victim.
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%. That comes across loud and clear that he was as much a victim of whatever happened.
Absolutely.
That led to his state. And that does come across so clearly.
My
One
favorite
of the wonderful things going forward is you will get a lot of the reasons for it.
Yeah.
And it adds to his character in such a way that you just love him more.
Yeah.
For what he's been able to go through.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Love his character. And I think that my favorite scenes in the entire book that were the few little like, you know, tiny breaths of air in my suffocation with this book.
Absolutely.
Were the relationship that starts between and is between Paragon and Amber.
Yeah.
Just oh my gosh.
It's beautiful.
I was a puddle.
Yeah.
Love it. Those scenes, there's such
because she doesn't blame him for his past.
No.
She accepts him for
he's being seen.
What he is. And she's like, no, this that I'm looking at now, this is my friend. Right. I'm not expecting you to be something you're not. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing you for what you are.
Right.
And there's a beauty to that.
It is.
Oh.
Yeah. And you know, for anybody that doesn't know or hasn't read the whole trilogy, I won't say more than that, but knowing more about that character specifically doesn't surprise me in the least, and it just further cements the things I already knew about that character.
What I will add here is that Robin Hobb has stated many times this, when she first wrote Liveships, when she first began writing, this was going to be a new series outside of, completely separate to Farseer. And when Amber showed up as a storekeeper on the Bingtown Traders shopping promenade, she was like, what are you doing here? And rather than tell herself, well, you don't belong, and cutting her out, she's gone, okay, why are you here? And as an author has explored, why are you here? And at that point has gone, oh, because these stories are connected. And she's discovered her own connections as she's written it, and thus Tawny Man was born. So I have to say, for a character who was brought in for one line, the character has done very well for themselves. So yay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those scenes, those are my favorite scenes in the book. Like it was such a beautiful, and also I have a very big soft spot for blind characters. And so when everything
PATRON.
that is a character type that I really like. Instant, you have my whole heart. Like, and
is it the vulnerability of the blindness?
And feeling like there's a again, going back to that struggle of helplessness and relying on, like, you have to some degree, even if it's someone you don't like, rely on other people because you don't have that visual of what's going on. There's a helplessness to that I think is really powerful. And the way that he tried so hard to project that image of kind of desperate strength is just like relatable, first of all. And second of all, it's such a beautiful vulnerability that he has. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, but you can see the potential for beauty in it. And I think that's what's so wonderful about Paragon.
Yeah. And that does come across loud and clear, is that this is a character who has depth. This is a character who, you know, is going to be very important to what's going to come. And that comes without really any, you know, big momentous events. You just feel it. You're like, no, he's important to this story. And he is so lovable, because you're like, no, and I've read it so many times. I don't know why you know he's a victim. I don't know what Robin Hobb did as an author to convey that, but you know that he's a victim, that he's not a perpetrator of bad things. And so you're immediately on his side.
I think
can you tell me that? Do you, I mean, as an author?
On the spot, I'm thinking through it now. And I think one of the things that she does with him that is really potent is usually survivors of terrible traumas. They don't always, like, and I'm not trying to speak for everybody's experience, but like oftentimes there's this horrible contradiction that exists where you are terrified to reach out and to be vulnerable. And yet some part of you wants so desperately to be seen and understood and loved that you will, that it's like this horrible tearing of self between those two things. Like, you can't, neither of them make the other make any sense. Right?
No, that, as you say that, I'm thinking, yes, she did do that with Paragon.
Yes.
You feel it, that he's got these massive walls up, and
but
he's reaching out so desperately.
Help. It's a cry for help.
Connection.
Yeah. It's a connection.
And for those who have made it through that wall, you see him with Ration. You know, that
he
that
has
I
a friend.
have a friend.
Yes.
And this friend won't abuse me.
Yes.
But he's so tentative with that friendship that he doesn't want to do or say anything to push Ration away.
Yes.
And
I
that's,
just,
that's exactly right.
That introduces almost a level of codependency, because
they're both a bit like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it also shows like Paragon is so afraid of you know, saying anything to drive away Brashen and Althea that he kind of like allows them to kind of be and do whatever. Whereas with Amber, I think that's the first time he kind of pushes her away, and he's
like,
no,
you're
and
actually seeing too much of me now.
Yeah, she's accepting of that, and she's accepting his boundaries, and she's asking consent.
And that makes him wary, and he's like, well, I don't know how to react to this because I've never had it. Nobody's given me that respect before.
This is an incredibly poignant story element for me specifically as well, and I think for many people that have gone through trauma, specifically in childhood. As somebody who has, you know, dissociative identity disorder, that connection between yourself as an adult and the wounded child inside, that is so beautifully portrayed in Paragon. Because the way that he's introduced is that he's this gruff adult man, and yet when he's feeling that vulnerability, being scared, that young wounded child comes forward, and that beautifully done, beautifully portrayed, I think, in that character.
Yes, it is. And you're right, and that it is when he feels the most pressured and the most vulnerable that the child comes out and is frightened.
It's that trauma response.
And I just want to hug. I just want to hug him.
Yes.
Because he so desperately needs that non-judgmental acceptance. He needs somebody to just hug him and say, it's actually okay. I like you.
Yeah.
I just like you.
You are valuable as you are.
Yeah, you don't have to make yourself worthy of like and love and care. And I give that to you.
Right.
And he needs it so badly.
He needs it so bad. And that's why I think his relationship with Althea and Brashen is not purely healthy yet, because that's like you know, there's a codependency there. And that's where that shift with Amber, I think, that's such a huge healing step in Paragon's journey, because now we have a friend who that codependency is broken right away at the beginning.
Yeah. See, this is a tick in the pro column for you continuing to read, because you do get that relationship in the Madship between Amber and Paragon really develop, and a lot of trust is extended on both sides, and you get the resistance from both of them. Like, oh, hold on. I now feel vulnerable because I've trusted you. And that relationship is a beautiful one to read for that reason. Yeah. And that they give each other honesty and boundaries, and the other respects it, and they're frightened because of that.
It's scary. Yeah. When you're building something that feels healthy, it's so foreign that it's terrifying.
Exactly. And she does get that feeling into it. You do get the sensation that they're both a bit frightened by how nice they are to each other. They don't know how to do healthy relationships.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so having one is strange and foreign and scary. And
it's that I said that multiple times while I was reading Ship of Magic, was that I wish the whole book was about Paragon, because honestly, like, he's the reason I will and would continue reading the series at some point. And I do, like, in terms of my current plan, I am definitely going to be taking a break.
Oh no, absolutely. And my offer, and for those of you in the chat who are concerned, my offer when I talk about Cliff Notes is because I've started this for myself, for when people are in the chats of various Discords and they want to talk about a specific chapter, is to give myself a little summary of each chapter, where I would send Tori a chapter and go, from that summary, you can either read that chapter or not. Right. You know, and go, okay, the summary's enough, and decide for yourself as you went. So in my mind, that would be ideal scenario number one. Ideal scenario number two is you just read chapter summaries, where you're getting more than an overall story synopsis, and you're going to get the meaning and the inferences that you've missed by not reading Hobb's amazing words, and you'll get the value of them in Tawny Man, because all of these things are, I don't want to say important to the overall story, but they're valid in terms of emotional connection to the story, is knowing a little bit more than a book summary of what went on. I literally did this morning. I did the prologue in chapter 1. I was like, this is much faster and would absolutely give you an idea in each chapter of whether that was a situation you wanted to read more in depth or not. And I thought, okay, that could be a way forward. It may not be. But either way, it is something I'm going to work on from here on. Because there are people who will be triggered by events. Thank you, Andrew. But it is traumatizing. These books are traumatizing. I fully admit that. They're traumatizing. And I may even do that specifically for the most traumatizing events that you've already had a heads up for. For people who have really sort of picked up their bootstraps and if they're going forward. I go, okay, don't read this chapter. Here is the breakdown of what happens. And one day, if you're feeling particularly strong, you can read that chapter for yourself. But for now, all you need to know is this information.
Right.
Because that's a bit much.
Yeah. Going down the list of characters in terms of it after Paragon. After Paragon, it becomes very messy.
Yes, it does. Okay, how about this? I will ask.
Okay.
And I'll ask about the smaller characters.
And I'll
first,
just
you'll have less to say.
I will return with an expression of some kind.
Yes. Okay. Ephron, Althea's father. Do you have any thoughts?
I think he went against his gut instinct, and I think that set his intention was to protect his family, and what he ended up doing was exactly the opposite. I think that like his intention was right before he made the decision to protect his family, but with the caveat, Althea is a spoiled brat.
Thank you.
I can't stand
because
Althea.
I agree with that.
Can't stand her.
Althea is a lot of hard
and
work.
So at the same time, handing Althea a live ship without the life experience to humbly understand what she's being given.
Yes.
Also would not have been. So I get that. Like, that's where I feel like Ephron was in a tough position. However, and if you like, well, maybe he could have, Brashen and Althea together. Well, Brashen isn't really that stable either. He's a drug addict, and
only been clean for a little while.
Right.
And he has promise at this point of the story.
Right.
He's not established as a steady bright.
So really, Ephron didn't have the right option in fairness. I don't know that I don't know what I wouldn't have given it to Kyle. I can tell you that. But
and here's the thing: is he didn't, and that's something that does get overlooked. Is he didn't give it to Kyle. He gave it to his daughter Kefria, and then by extension, her husband has taken command. So logically speaking, it's a decision I understand a father making.
Right.
That I give this to my oldest daughter rather than my younger.
Yeah.
And this will work out.
The fact that
his older daughter is married to Kyle
says a lot about her as a person. I have
come
thoughts
back
on that.
Give me thoughts on Kefria. Give me thoughts. What do we think about Kefria?
Okay, here's something just in general about fantasy that I am going to be making a video on soon when I figure out how I want to articulate it. I want to do a video about finding myself in fantasy as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I struggle with that as a very tomboy girl who isn't a spoiled brat with a sword and isn't trying to be the Hulk and also isn't a damsel in distress with petticoats. Yeah. I struggle to find anyone in fantasy that I'm like, that's me.
Yeah. You're exactly right.
Yeah, Brienne of Tarth was one of the first ones that I was like, hey,
like this one.
Yeah, I like this one. Yeah. Because she had a sword and she was strong, but she was also deeply vulnerable. And I was like, thank you.
Very feminine.
She has layers.
I love Brienne.
Love Brienne. Gwendolyn Christie. Brilliant.
Oh, goddess. Just absolute goddess.
Brilliant portrayal of her. Anyways, back to Ship of Magic.
The sigh. Kefria. Okay, so Kefria clearly bothers you on some level here. What is it that makes you go...
There's a deep... Oh. Because there's certain female characters that just make you go, I'm ashamed of my gender. You know? And I think I have the respect, not respect, that's not the right word. I have an understanding for Kefria as a mother of young children myself. Okay. Parenting is hard.
Parenting is hard.
Parenting is so hard. And I can understand for her personality type, this is completely anathema to me as a person, because I'm a very like bowl Kyle over. Like if I would, I can't, I'm not even gonna put myself in that situation. I'm not gonna do it. I was gonna say, if I were married to Kyle, we're not gonna go there. He'd be dead.
It would never happen.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Kefria, as someone who I think is in some ways a reflection of who her daughter is struggling to become, I don't think Kefria ever found her identity. And I think she completely placed her total identity in her husband's view of her. And so at this point, she does not have the self-awareness and self-respect to stand for any of her own opinions. I don't think she has any of her own opinions at the beginning of the book. Okay. And that's heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And I again, there's that contradiction of that revulsion that I feel in her unwillingness to stand up to Kyle, but I also understand from her perspective as a character why it's happening. I get it. I'm just mad at it.
Okay. So my response to this is something that I thought about quite a long time ago. And it kind of bleeds into what we've already talked about in terms of gaslighting and manipulation. And so I'm going to open it with a question that I want you to think about while I say my bit. Okay. Which is, why is Kefria still living in her mother's house? And I say that because what we've learned of Kyle in the story is that he is this manipulative person. And he has hidden a lot of that aspect of his character from the Vestrit family, knowing that Ephron is not going to have allowed that. So he knows it's wrong. He knows that behavior is not okay. Okay, so he's hidden that. And the death of Ephron is when we get him come up to the plate and be the scumbag he is. Not a fan of Kyle, just saying. And he has created a situation where he has never allowed his wife, who I'm firmly of the opinion he married just to get into a family with a live ship, he has never allowed his wife any position that encourages her to be independent. He doesn't want her to be independent. He wants her to look to him for decisions. And he has always wanted that. And he allowed her to send Wintro to a monastery because it was the one thing that she felt strongly enough about to fight him on. So he let that go because Ephron was alive. He couldn't browbeat her into not doing that. The moment Ephron dies, he sends for his son and he's like, nope, it's not happening now. And so my feeling for Kefria is that she is one of the biggest victims of Kyle. She has been the victim of his abuse for so many years, and she doesn't recognize it as abuse. So many people don't when they're in a situation where that manipulation is so very subtle and is about controlling decisions, controlling information, controlling the situation around somebody where they don't have agency. And he's let her stay in her mother's house. At no point has he said, I'm working on a ship, we're married, we're having children, we should have our own home. He's never said that. He's encouraged her to stay at home with her mother, where she's never had to step up and make decisions on a household level. So she remains somebody's daughter.
Right.
She's not the head of her own household.
That's what I was going to say. Yep.
So I really feel for Kefria. She is just so too innocent when she met Kyle, and she never got to grow up. So that's where I don't think I've ever felt angry with Kefria. I've always felt incredible sorrow for Kefria because she was the victim from such an early age.
Yeah. Totally. I totally agree. Like in terms of her being a victim of Kyle's and I think too, Ephraim and Ronica strike me too as the kind of parents. Can you go around that way, please? Thank you. As the type of parents who always made the decisions and always, so she was a very easy prey for Kyle because she is still a child in her own way. She's never had that emotional development to, and when you asked that question, my first thought was because she's putting her as the head of her own household would give her some backbone.
Yeah, because she would simply have to. Her husband's away. She would have to make decisions. Right. She would have to be strong enough in her own right to talk to store merchants, to talk to the people who run the farm, and she would have to make decisions, and she would have to be unquestionable about them. She will have had to have learnt to not take any bullshit.
Right.
And Kyle didn't want that for his wife.
Right.
He wanted her to remain a manipulatable child, so encouraged her instead to stay in her mother's house, which also gave him an in with the family every time they came into port, because he was living in their home.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I sigh deeply with Kefria because and this is one of those points where I think
Andrew's quite right in the chat here.
Yes.
In taking all agency from the victim to forced dependency, because 100%. That is exactly what Kyle has done to his wife. And it makes me so angry.
I think that resistance that I feel with Kefria largely comes from the anger that I so badly
want her to do.
Right. But at the same time, like I said, when you're a child yourself and you are given children to raise, there's nothing that will show you your not inefficiency, but like when you haven't that emotional development that you need to catch up on that you haven't had yet, and then you're supposed to be responsible for the development of
Malta.
We'll get there. We will get there. We will get there. But yeah, and like honestly, out of the entire Vestrit family, I'm more frustrated by pretty much everybody else in the family besides Kefria. Like she just she frustrates me on a different level, but I think it's very I want her so badly to do something, you know?
Oh, no, exactly. It's like there's potential in you. Could you just please step up?
Yeah.
And be who you could be. Yeah. And at this point she hasn't.
But I can see the potential for it because of how she's standing up to her mother at the end of the book, where we're seeing a little bit of her starting to, nope, I'm making a different, and maybe it's the wrong decision.
I actually agree with that. And so as you say, it's not necessarily the right decision, but she's making one, which is really the point.
Right.
But so I find that to be one of the most interesting dynamics in the trilogy is the women in the Vestrit family, where you've got Ronica, who is a very strong woman, and that comes across loud and clear. She's been running the estates. She knows what she wants. She's very decisive, and has, in being that way, hasn't left space for Kefria to grow, because she doesn't hand over choices to her daughter, because she's like, I've got it. I've got it. It's all good.
That might be an interesting point too, to how, like, because I was so frustrated in the beginning where Ronica has that moment where she goes, oh, maybe Kyle sucks, you know?
Yes.
And I think one of the things that aided in blindness is also a big theme in this book. And one of the things that I was going to mention about Paragon that I totally forgot until this moment is that his physical blindness is a kind of a metaphor in a way for his blindness to his trauma.
Yes.
That you know,
just inability to see what there is. Yeah.
Blindness in Ronica's case, I think she had so much of her own opinion and so much of how she envisioned the future that she decided this is how things are going to go, and Keffria is going to get the ship and Kyle will be the captain, and she had, and that blindness totally allowed Kyle to just be like, great plan, love that. Well, you know?
Yeah. Because she, as somebody who has fallen for Kyle in his sheep's clothing, is going to go, things are going to continue how they have done.
How they are, exactly.
And so all of the income that we got from the ship under my husband will now just happen under Kyle. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, will retain our land-based estates and the money from the ship.
Because that is the way things should be.
And that is how it should have gone.
Yes.
So yes, she's blind in one degree, and on the other, it feeds into my hatred of Kyle because he has hidden that side of himself from the women in the family. Mm-hmm. And only when Ephron goes do they begin to see his true colors. Yeah. And that's, as you say, when she starts to go, oh, maybe Kyle isn't the choice here, but it's too late.
It's too late.
It's happened. It's done.
Well, and with Kyle too, I think that's one of the things that, because he enacts all of his decisions and his plans with this such an assurance of superiority to the women in this family.
Yes.
He's superior to everyone, but you can really feel it in the way that he talks to Ronica, Keffria, and even Malta.
Yeah, because he expects her to fall into line in her role as marriageable daughter.
And she's daddy's little favorite.
That's right.
Which she creates a dependency. She also has a dependency. Like, he's so good at reading what each of these women and people in general are going to respond women to. Specifically. Yeah. The way he handles Wintrow is a whole different story. But like, we'll get there. Yeah. But yeah, it's this disgusting, like, super important superiority that he just why Keffria is never going to go against me. She doesn't have the backbone. I don't even he just assumes
factor it in.
I don't even have to think about it. Yeah, exactly.
And it's awful.
And I agree, Evie. I think, and that's what I was mentioning at the end of the book. That's where I can see the potential for Keffria's character to really step into herself as matriarch, and become a pillar in her own life.
And to be a strength in her own family.
Exactly. So I see that potential.
Part of the damage that Kyle has done to this family is he's taken away the agency of these women, who all of them have this potential to be these strengths.
Right.
And he's
and from his son. Yeah.
Yeah, and from his son. He's not a good person.
We will get to Kyle.
We don't like him. But then, you look at something where you've got somebody like Brashen, where Ronica treats Brashen how she should have treated Kyle. Mm-hmm. And that here's this guy showing up at my doorstep with my daughter. How dare you use this opportunity to get in with the family? Mm-hmm. And Brashen, that's not Brashen's goal at all. He's like, sorry. I'm just bringing her home because she was getting drunk, man. I didn't want her to get into trouble. And Ronica comes out with this really defensive, I don't like what you stand for vibe. Mm-hmm. And everything she's against, she's already accepted into her home.
Right.
And as you were saying, the blindness of it, it's really impactful because you're reading it going, you have that so wrong. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah.
And all of these assumptions that lead into behaviors. And it's all believable because we all know people who do this.
Right. I think with Brashen specifically, since we brought him up, there's a conversation that he has with Althea that I appreciated. They have their little, you know, the little fling
Yep.
in the ship. That's on the
It's on the whaler.
The whaler, yep. Super romantic.
Yeah.
But his reaction to Althea's original sexual experience, like, that was one of the reasons why, and I liked Brashen before, but that specific conversation was one of the reasons why I was like, somebody
he's
who's
a good man,
right, who's like, he's got all these flaws, but at the same time he has a very strong moral code, and that's what Ephron saw in him.
Yeah,
that's what Ephron saw, and that's, I think Althea is drawn to that because she knows she needs that in her life, but she's still resisting it. You know.
Yeah. But this leads and feeds back into the gaslighting and manipulation, in that Althea is convinced that was a healthy interaction.
Right.
And it's her own shock more than anything in that moment when Brashen tells her, no, you were assaulted.
Right.
That was not okay.
Yes.
That it puts her in a shocked position where she has to reassess so much of what she thought about herself.
Right.
In that, oh, I've been carrying guilt and feelings of being dirty and shame. I've been carrying this.
And that's
and actually it's not on me.
That's a lot of awareness all at once.
All at once. It's just so much.
And I think that's why she's pushing Brashen
She's
away.
Like, well, hang on, I need my moment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like me with this book.
Yeah.
Hold on.
It's too much all at once. I need to think about that.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most incredible moments for me in the trilogy, because there are women still now today who carry that burden for exactly that reason. They're told, you asked for it. You brought it on yourself. You shouldn't have.
It wasn't
when actually
bad.
It wasn't on them.
Right.
And it should not have happened.
Right.
And to watch her have that moment is quite empowering as a woman, to go, yes, you don't have to carry that. That is not your burden to carry.
Yeah.
And Brashen gave her that. Brashen gave her that insight to say, that wasn't okay.
Right.
I see that from outside. That wasn't okay.
Right.
So powerful.
Very powerful. And I also love, because I think one of the things, like, as someone who, you know, has been through trauma and is married to a wonderful, incredible, supportive husband and partner.
Mr. Torrey.
He's literally a gem. I think it makes me sad, I think, in so much postmodern kind of thought, that it's like men just suck, period.
Yes.
All the time.
They don't. And that's the problem.
Right.
Women don't know. Like, we know there are good ones out there, but all of us have met that one.
That makes
and that one has ruined every interaction from that point on, and because we don't know.
That was something that I appreciate about that interaction, like you were saying too, like Brashen giving her that, the fact that it is coming from another man who isn't looking at her as an object, who is looking at her as someone that he treasures, is also really powerful.
For consent
exactly. I love that. I love that relationship. Yeah, love that.
But she's very resistant as well, because she wants it to not be her choice, so that she can blame it on someone else later. And you see that so directly in her thoughts. I don't want to have that decision. I don't want to be the one making it. And the fact that Brashen pushes her into and going, no, I actually need an answer from you before I go any further.
Yeah.
Is just incredibly poignant. And because, as you say, he's not a fabulous bloke, Brashen. He has his flaws, but the heart of him
is good.
He's decent. He's a decent person.
Which is hard to find in this world, apparently, in the Liveship world. It's like, wow.
And so the timing of it all really brings home to Althea that this you've got sexual relationships so out of balance in your own head. Yep. You've got to think about this.
Yeah, you have to actually confront it.
Yeah. And she does find that confronting, and she does reel from that.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's important.
Yeah.
It's
for
so
sure.
important. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
Vivacia. Should we talk about Vivacia?
Oh, yes. Actually, before we go on to Vivacia, I'm going to ask you to excuse me for a moment because I need to go to the ladies.
Oh,
but I won't be long.
Do. I will chat with some people in the chat.
Please do.
Let's see. Ronica being control freak versus kind of controlling. Perfect combo of Yeah. Yep. Totally agree, Evie. Ronica Kefri would have been Malta. Yep. That's the thing, Andrew, that I noticed about this. Like, the longer I've been away from it and still thinking through it, is the layers. Like, this isn't just one person doing something to one person. This is this person's choice and this person's choice and this person's choice and this person's choice and this person's personality and et cetera, all combine. And that layered approach to how those human interactions affect their lives and the decisions they make going forward is so real and unique. And I really appreciate that in Hobb's writing. My computer screen just went completely dark and I don't know why. Hello? Can you get, well, I can't see your chat responses, but let's see. My computer screen is completely black, so I cannot see anything. Technology. Okay, you guys tell Derri when she comes back. I'm going to jump out and just restart my computer super fast. I will be back in like 2 minutes. Oh, that might be Derri coming back. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm back, I think. Can you guys see and hear me again? That was so weird. Hey, thanks, Evie. That was weird. My computer screen just went black. I can still hear Derri's screen, but I couldn't see anything, so I just had to restart my computer. Thankfully, it does that very quickly. Thanks for staying, guys. Yeah, that's what I figured, Daniel, because I could still hear Derri's side of the conversation, like the shuffles and stuff in the back. So I assumed that you guys could still see me. But I mean, there could be worse things. Welcome back, Derri.
It's better.
I had to start my computer while you were gone.
Oh, dramas.
Yes. My
That's all
screen
right.
went black for no reason all of a sudden. And I was like, okay, I guess we're restarting real quick. So, all right.
That's all right. I got to the family bathroom and someone was already in there. I was like, no.
Hurry up. Sorry, I got a couple bites of my Twinkie, so we're good.
Everybody's back.
Okay, we're Vivacia.
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 Let's go.
Another sigh.
I reckon. So what are your, because obviously we meet Vivacia from the moment of her birth.
Yes,
So,
and
even that was traumatic.
It was. And it's, again, one of those heartbreaking things where you can see the potential and how beautiful something can be.
Because she has already formed this pseudo connection with Althea, and you're like, that's a beautiful bond.
Yes. And then Hobb just wrecks it. I think Vivacia, I do really like the arc in most of the book for Vivacia, because I think it's it's also giving us a little bit of insight into Paragon at the same time, which I really appreciated. And I like to see how Hobb was really committed to that developmental process with Vivacia, where she's going from newborn to she has her own opinions now, and she's starting to think about things in a different way, and she's not relying simply on one person to tell her how to think, which is another agency part of that agency theme.
Agency is huge in this trilogy. It really is. And so when she pushes back against her captain, and she's like, okay then, and she shifts her own planks and starts wallowing in the water, and you really like, you take that power. And again, Kyle just is like, I hold the power. And he threatens Wintro. And you're just like, oh, poor Vivacia. She's finally got the strength in herself to have made a stand, and she still has no power.
Right. And it's so, because she's the ship. Good heavens.
like if anybody has the power, it should be the ship in this situation.
And I think you can start seeing that fracture of self and of psyche that happened to Paragon. You can, and not that it's the same situation, obviously, but like we got enough bits and pieces of what was happening with Paragon, and Vivacia's response to like Wintrow's mutilation and all of these different things, and the slaves in the hold of the ship, and like how it's this true for anyone. You can only take so much before you start splintering, right?
That's right. And she's taking on a level of
no pun intended
that no live ship has been asked to take before.
Yes.
She's literally the first live ship that's ever had slaves on her ship, and she's feeling their deaths. She's taking the energy and all
she's
of that
an empath.
Misery on board. Forgive the lamp on board. But it's altering her view. Like anybody who encounters such a horrific situation, it alters your view of the people around you. Who 100%. Of the people around you are going to support what's happening?
Right.
Who's going to be on your side fighting what's happening?
Right.
It makes you reassess all of the relationships you have. And she's looking at the people in her life going, you took Althea away from me.
Yeah.
You have control over me. The only person I have any connection to doesn't want to be here. That,
how much more
felt for Vivacia. She felt so alone and so isolated and powerless. So that it all comes back to that agency and who has control in any given situation.
Right.
But she does. She begins to have this relationship with Wintro as almost more as equals than bonded.
Yes.
Where they actually talk to each other.
And they're choosing to talk to each other. Yeah. 100%. And I think too, like, Vivacia, the thing that I think at the very end that, oh man, her reaction to Kenneth gave me the absolute freaking creeps, and I hated it so much. I was like, Ew.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and this will start now, and I'm going to apologize for it in advance. But so many of these elements you won't get a real true understanding of until Tourneyman. You'll get breakthroughs and you'll get insights, and you'll be like, okay, I get it now. And then you'll get more breakthroughs and more insights. You'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get it now. It will take everything in Tourneyman as well for you to go, oh, I get it. Okay. Because that's the nature of the series, is that everything's on page. Nothing will change. Mm-hmm. There's no retconning happening, but you're just given enough insight as the story progresses that it alters what was happening in your understanding earlier. And Vivacia's reaction to Kennett is unpleasant to read. You're like, no, another innocent woman that's being controlled by this asshole. It's not great. And after the way we've seen Kennett interacting with Etta, we're like, he should never be around women at all, ever. He shouldn't just not be allowed. And now he's got this, it's almost virginal, pure young woman in his
clutches
of control. And he's like, oh, it's really repugnant.
Yes.
Because you've got a sense of how tainted he is as a person. Mm-hmm. And to have her just so, I don't know, besotted with him almost. You're just like, oh, yeah, this is going nowhere good. Yeah.
It was awful. I agree, Evie.
No, and we were actually talking before the live stream about the difference in the hatred between Kyle and Kennett. And I'm firmly of the opinion that Kyle is the Umbridge to Kennett's Voldemort. In that Kennett is so overtly the bad guy you don't really interact with on a day-to-day basis. But most of us know a Kyle. And Kennett is a person, because even though they're just words on a page, he's totally a person. Kennett is a person who, to the vast majority of people that he interacts with, is a force of good. Mm-hmm. The things that he does, regardless of his motivation, the things that he does result in positive outcomes for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It's only for those very few that are in his inner circle who actually understand him as an individual person, who understand how toxic he is as a person. And the dichotomy of that, where so many people think that the sun shines out of this man's bottom, versus those who understand that no, what's coming out his bottom is not sunshine, is huge. Yep. Absolutely huge. And it's fascinating to read, because very few of us know a Kennett, for as many of us do know a Kyle. So you were saying that the commentary around those individuals was so very different.
Yes.
Before you came into the story.
It's reflected, I think, in some ways in the story as well. But Kyle was like, Kyle, you're gonna hate. Kyle, you're gonna hate. Like, until my only expectation of this trilogy was hating Kyle for a while.
And that was met.
And that was met. Well done. Yes. Kennett repulses me on a whole different level than Kyle does, because he's the kind of disgusting manipulator. And like you were saying with the Umbridge to Voldemort, everyone knows that Umbridge is awful. Everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows. Even Umbridge knows that Umbridge is awful, right?
Yeah.
Voldemort, it has these adoring followers because they've romanticized who he is and they've made him inhuman, right? And Kenneth is that is the most
force, the
terrifying,
unbeatable thing.
Yeah.
That's on my side.
Kyle disgusts me on a visceral level. Kenneth, as the person type, disturbs me so deeply. Because he's the type of person, like if Kyle did something to you, there would be a large group of people that you could tell, and they'd be like, well, yeah.
Well, have you met Kyle?
Have you met the guy? Right? Kenneth's the kind of person who, if your word was pitted against his and he had done something horrific to you, everyone would believe him.
And that's exactly why the traumatic thing around Kenneth is that he does have this cult of personality around him, where he is seen as being, able to do no wrong. And again, from the wide perspective, that's true. From a wide perspective, his aims, his goals, they're all positive things. He wants to make this particular dwelling, this township, he wants to make it stronger and healthier and more defensible. He wants people to be able to live there and not get raided. These are fantastic things for the people who live there. He wants to free the slaves, not because that's just the morally correct thing to do, but because in the moment, that's what he needs to achieve the next objective.
It gives him some. He gains something
so he's
by
just, he's surfing. He's the best spin doctor ever. Basically, he's surfing the situations around him, and the outcome of those situations make him look good. Even
because
though
he's lucky. I can't stand him. I could not from day one.
Fascinating to read, because when you get in his head, you're like, oh my God, you're the worst person ever. And then you get in someone else's head and you see him from outside and you're like, I understand why they admire him. I don't
though.
Really?
No.
I did. I was like, no, I get it. I see why they follow him.
Even when it's outside of his perspective, all I can see is you guys don't see him. Like there's no
and that's
like
that's a deliberate thing.
Yeah, and I can't like I've heard that phrase so what'd you say, Evie? Yes, this phrase so many people have said that.
Fascinating.
I don't want to read him. Like every time his character comes up, I want to skip. I don't want to know. I'm not fascinated. I don't want to know about it. I hate him so much.
and that is objectively the correct response to him.
Thanks.
And what we're seeing is that reality isn't showing that.
Right, exactly.
And that the reality is the false front. It's the spin. It's I'm going to use this to my advantage. And that's what we're seeing. Right. And that's what makes it, for me, that's what makes it so fascinating. I'm like, but if any of you just look at what's happening and take away your emotional reaction to Kenneth, he's not a good person. But all of them are bringing their emotions to it. All of them are giving him credit for things he didn't instigate. But it's making him look fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh.
There's the scene where the scene where he's being awful to Etta the whole time. No, but there's a scene when they're on the ship and he's lost his leg at this point and Etta's trying to take care of him. And I can't remember if he's like trying to hold on to her or something of that nature. And the charm bites him. Yeah. And I was like, could you a little harder?
Yeah. You're right next to that vein in his
Do
wrist.
it again.
Could you just make,
Yeah, because
what's interesting here though is, have you noticed it's the charm that likes Etta?
Yes,
the charm is the one that's winning Etta.
Yes,
and I love that. It's such a strange little piece of the story, and I really
I need to know more about that because we haven't gotten a lot of information about.
And the Wizardwood story is obviously part of the next couple of books,
right?
And the personality that little charm has is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's working almost on Kenneth's behalf and also working against him, because it's like, okay, I want I want you to be doing this,
Right.
and you don't want to do that. So I'm going to work as much as I can to make what I want to have happen. So in that way, he is on Kenneth's side. And on the other, he's like, I don't give a shit if you don't want this woman in your life. This woman is necessary to us. I'm going to win her to us. And it absolutely does. And Etta as a character, again, it's this gaslighting, this manipulation. I'm going to make you feel safe. I'm going to give you this place where nobody can hurt you. And simply giving a sex worker safety is enough to win her completely and utterly.
Right.
Just the tiniest crumb off his plate is enough to win her utterly. And it almost makes me sick. Because I'm like, you are worth so much more than that.
Right.
Just as a human being.
Well, and then
you will accept this.
Insult of insults is when they go on Vivacia for the first time and seeing the way that Kenneth talks to her in front of Etta is like,
it's really
it's disgusting
revolting
on both sides for so many reasons.
It's properly revolting because you're like, ugh. There's an element of cruelty and the cruel element in that manipulation makes that really hard to read.
It is.
But,
I don't know what Evie is giving you a knowing look for, but she's giving you a
look. I do.
I'm going to come back to that at some point in the future, and you can tell me what that was for.
And you'll be like, I get it now. I get it. And this is the wonderful, and this is why it's like, I don't want to force you into reading, but I don't want you to miss stuff either. So if you are going to not read them and move into Tawnyman, I want to make sure that you get the info that you need to go into Tawnyman to get the fullness, the fullest experience as you can. Right. Because there's just so much that if you haven't read Liveships, you just don't notice because you don't know.
Right.
You know, and so you can't get the benefit out of Tawnyman that you could potentially, you know, and I want everyone to get the most out of it because I'm like, no, you have to get the most out of it. It's so good. So it's purely selfish. I just want you to be gushing at the end of Tawnyman. Ultimately,
I mean, I still expect. I'm going to temper my expectations going in, but I am hoping to love it because it's.
Tawnyman is very much the continuation from Fitz. We pick up Fitz, and he is still Fitz, being Fitz, and it's Fitz's characters and Fitz's storytelling and that style. So if you enjoyed Farseer, you're going to enjoy Tawnyman.
Yeah.
Full stop. That end. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
So you'll be fine because you loved Farseer.
Yeah.
Tawnyman, got it going on.
I'm excited.
Yeah. But I need to know in my own heart of hearts that you've got all the little nuggets that I can make sure that you need to go into Tawnyman and get that payoff and get those moments of.
Well, and I think too, like I
don't want you to be in pain. Like I don't want you to suffer.
Right.
To get
well,
there.
And that's why I think learning boundaries and putting those boundaries in place in terms of like when I'm gonna come back to the series. I'm putting it down for right now because I need a little bit of recovery period.
Absolutely.
But I mean,
give me a few days and I'll just get those little chapter bites to you and you can go into Tawnyman because then you will love it and it'll be great.
Yeah. And like I put some, I haven't finished Malazan yet either because I got to a point where I knew I needed to take a break from it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's still one of my favorite series. And I've only read 4 books of it. Like you have to, I think, recognize when it's time to give yourself some space. And I do want to finish Liveships at some point. I know that I
would never push you.
Right.
When it physically,
I had a very strong, very strong physical reactions. Yeah.
I don't want anybody to have to deal with that because at that point, when your own body is like,
stop.
You then have to deal with stuff in your own head instead of just what's happening in the story.
And I was going through a lot of that in this book.
But then that's far too much for a reader to have to deal with in order to continue what is, in essence, just a story.
Let's talk
It's
about
just a story.
Let's talk about Wintrow, because Wintrow was probably the most triggering POV for me.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. That breaks my heart a little, actually, knowing Wintrow's story.
And that's, in the beginning, like I said, I thought Wintrow was going to be my favorite. And he was for the first like 15, 20% of the book. And then there came a point where I had to emotionally distance myself so heavily from Wintrow that I couldn't feel anything in his chapters, because I dissociated from it so heavily, because I was like, his was the one that just felt the most like, and then of course that happened, and then of course that happened, and then, you know, and it was just so much gaslighting, and so much. And for me specifically, Wintrow is very young in his faith.
He is very young.
And he's very young in general, but he's also very young in his faith. And one of the things, and I think that's really what contributes to that kind of holier than thou, because he's struggling. And I think in some ways he's struggling so hard to feel superior to anything because of the way he's being treated, that he's
absolutely, he's hanging on to the one thing he can trust.
And it's now an unhealthy relationship, even with the faith that he has. But as someone who is a Christian and values my faith very heavily, seeing him so desperately cling to that faith was actually one of the few parts of his POV that I really resonated with.
Yeah.
And recognizing he's misusing it. However, not misusing it, that's not the right word. He's
I will say in that one, and I actually talked to Evie about this yesterday, was one of the things I love about Wintrow's story, and he's not my favorite by quite a long way. I find him annoying. But one of the wonderful things I find with Wintrow is, as he matures throughout the trilogy, his faith remains a constant.
Right.
His actual faith is very genuine. It's very real. He very much lives his experience with his faith. And I love his adherence to his faith.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Christian. I'm not somebody who worships. And that's just me.
Yeah.
I can still see it in Wintrow as this beautiful core that he has hung on to. And he does hang on to it. It sees him through some incredibly traumatic moments. You see already as how he's got through some insane cruelty from his worldly father. And that he continues to have that faith.
Right.
In spite of the cruelties his father has laid on him, that he can still see the beauty in his faith, that he can still trust in his faith, I think is one of the most beautiful little subplots in the series. Yeah. I really, really love it.
Yeah.
Because he does hold true to it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those quiet, powerful things.
Yeah.
It's just there in the story. I love it.
Yeah, I really resonated with that a lot. And again, seeing the potential going forwards, that was my hope, that Hobb was going to leave that as a major core piece of his story.
She does.
So I appreciate that.
And I think it's important to know that we're not going to have that torn from him. He is going to be able to continue that relationship that he has with his God, and that he will draw strength from it, and he will see the world through those eyes that we saw so very early.
Yeah.
I mean, I said to you earlier, I started the project of synopses chapters, and I read the first chapter where we meet Wintrow at the monastery, which I always love, meeting him in the monastery. And the philosophical conversation he has with his mentor about the role of priests as judges, and how it goes completely against all of their teachings, which tell you that man cannot judge. That's up to God. So how do you balance this? How do you send a priest to go and give judgment? And he has this quite intensely philosophical discussion as an incredibly young man with his mentor, and his discussion, his take on that concept gives his mentor movement in his own journey, where he's given an insight. So, that helps. I'm going to now think on that. And I loved that we see that so early in Wintrow. that he can look at a situation and be very gracious in his thinking about, okay, well, if God is a thing, if my God Sa is this and he's that and he's the other, in this aspect of my God, this would be a thing. And I just love the delicacy that Hobb gives belief in this trilogy, because she never poo-poos it. There's never a sense that this is all just a load of collywobbles,
right?
And nobody cares. No, this is a genuine belief that people hold. These are the doctrines. These are the ways people live who believe. And it's just there.
Right.
And I appreciate that level of respect, even as someone who doesn't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did too, important. Because I do feel like in a lot of fantasy, yeah, I mean, just to put it bluntly, Christians are often the bad guy, like the not Christians, you know what I mean? And so it was really encouraging.
And often religion is classed as the bad guy.
Yeah, very often.
Controlling thing that's doing this for their own reasons. And whereas in this story, we very much get some wonderful people at the monastery talking to Winthrop, helping Winthrop, guiding him into his gifts and into his thinking. And okay, you're very logical. Let's encourage this growth in you with these aspects of Sa. And we see a religious body doing what a religious body is intended to do, which is nurture their people, give them strength, give them fellowship, you know, to better the world around them. Yeah. And I just, again, as a non-religious person, I really respected that in the story. I liked the way it was treated. I liked the humanity of it, if you like. Basically, it was all the good things that I want to see in religion, that I don't often. And so I liked being able to see it as a good thing. Yeah,
I did too. That was one point of his POV that I really noted and appreciated. One of the 2 chapters I listened to of Ship of Magic on audiobook was the amputation of Winthrow's finger. And first of all,
sorry, I mean, that narration is so awful.
It was not great, especially when she's reading Winthrop, because like, no. Anyways, but I read a lot of like military fantasy, and I'm also a doula, so like I'm not squeamish.
No, and yet that scene is pretty in your face. And this is why we say people don't give Hobb the credit of being as grim as she is. There's some really grim moments.
Some really grim stuff in there. Yeah. Yeah. So overall, Winthrop, I was
see that understanding of courage. What is courage? Because he's at this point been laughed at by the crew for not being conned by the dancing bear and the bloke. So, you know, he's a laughing stock among the crew, and he's at fault for the injury sustained by someone else who did fall for the con. And to then so calmly take the amputation is a level of courage that these men genuinely don't understand. They don't understand what it is that Winthrop is showing them.
The amount of gaslighting in Winthrop, that his POV hands down was the hardest to read.
Yeah.
And for me personally, probably the most triggering, because it was just gaslight, basically solid through the entire book. And so I felt like I wanted.
And he's aware of it. Yes. Makes it worse. Like he knows that he's being put in these situations that are going to make him look bad. He knows that there's nothing he can do that will show him how he actually is.
Right.
And that frustration comes across so loudly and clearly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is painful to read that.
I'm trying to think.
Vivacious response to that amputation was interesting.
Yes.
Where she's like, that her admiration of the courage, because she saw it as courage.
Yes.
Provoked a response in her, and I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
But it drove his father further away because Kyle saw it as a judgment on himself.
And Kyle is the type of character who cannot, I mean, Kennett's this way too, but Kyle cannot handle the idea that someone is more of a man than he is. He knows that he's not, but when it's shown right in his face and he knows his son is a better man than he is. He knows that.
He really does. And
that's why
he's showing him so directly that I am a better person than you are. Mm-hmm. And Kyle is so enraged by it that he has to emasculate his son even more. Like, no, you're not allowed to be better than me. Rather than applauding this incredible moment of courage in his son, he's instead seen it as an insult to his own sense of self. Right. And it just is so repugnant and so believable. And this is his son.
Mm-hmm. That's what makes it so awful.
And it really is. And this is where that storyline gets me, is that this is your son. Your son should be able to fall back always on the knowledge that this is my father and he has my back. Mm-hmm. And at no point does Winthrop have that. And that makes me so angry for Winthrop, because he should. Every child should have that from their parents.
Right.
That, okay, you're a dick, but I love you. Might be as far as you might get, but they love you and they're there for you. Winthrop doesn't even have that.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have it from a bloke like Kyle.
Right.
I can't even with that man. I just can't. It's cruel and it's horrible, and I'm not a fan.
I should have invited Pete to join us, just so that anytime we mention Kyle, we have a brief break where Pete tells us how he would murder Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we did used to have, I was part of a Voxer chat with Pete when Pete was reading through, and every day we would get our daily dose of Kyle, and we would get this wonderfully imaginative way that Kyle was going to be killed. It was very satisfying. And it rapidly became my favorite point of the day, I will admit. Because I'm not a big fan of Kyle.
Which is fair.
Noticed.
I'd be concerned if you were, Derri.
Not a fan. And, there are villains in the series, and Evie will attest when we next chat to her. There is one that she considers to be worse. And she's not wrong in her reasons for it at all. Like, he's right up there. But Kyle remains, for me, the one that I just most viscerally want to throw into the face of the sun so I can watch him burn. Not a fan. And in this mood, I have to ask, how was your experience with Malta?
Oh, man. Malta's mother describes her at one point as a tiny predator.
Yeah.
And that just about, like, here's the thing. So this was one of those moments where it kind of crossed the line into almost ridiculous for me, because the Vestrit family as a whole, I was just like, good Lord. Through the
whole much toxicity.
And then Hobb's like, all right, now you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add another POV for this family, and it's Malta.
Even worse.
And I'm like, what I really wanted right now.
How bad could it be?
What I really wanted right now is a 12-year-old spoiled brat who is trying to flash boys and is mad because her mother won't let her.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
totally.
Great. Definitely needed that in my life at this moment in this book. Like, fabulous timing. At that point, Derri, I couldn't have just a simple reaction to just Malta, because by the time I got to Malta, I was so sick of the entire book. I was so sick of it, and I was so mad, and I was just so anything else?
Yeah.
That you get to Malta.
Look, there's more.
And she's just the little toxic cherry on top of the cake, like she was just, I think I kind of channeled. She's awful. And I think I kind of channeled all of my rage into her character a little bit as I was reading, because which is telling, because I think I'm not the only one in that experience to do that. However, this like, so much at that point. You as the reader know so much at that point that Malta's stupidity and cluelessness is just unforgivable. Like, you're just so over it by that point that you're just like, you shut up.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Yeah. And that's enough out of you.
She was
she's insufferable. She's properly insufferable. And every single person that reads the trilogy meets Malta with that feeling. Yes. Every single person. Good. I do on reread, and I know her story. And I just want to shake her because she's so bloody annoying.
And she's so dumb. Like, she's not. But that's the problem, is that she's smart enough that she thinks she's so smart. She's so smart that she thinks she knows everything, which is like every teenage girl on the planet. I was that.
She is smart. And that's, I think, the problem. She's bored.
She's 100%.
A girl with so much potential in her intelligence. And all she's given to work with is, you're pretty and I need you to be marriageable to the richest man. And so she's using all of that intelligence to do that. And it comes out as the cattiest, nastiest, pettiest behavior that you just want to shake her so hard that child services would get involved. It is dangerous how much I want to shake Malta. Her strength of character, and I don't know if you've heard this already before, she rapidly becomes most people's favorite character of this trilogy. Her growth is exponential. I have never seen character growth and development like it. It is astounding.
Believe that, and I can see the potential for a very dynamic character arc with Malta. However, with that intro, it would take a miracle of God for me to have Malta as my favorite character by the end. Even if she becomes just an amazing hero of a character and just.
It is astonishing. And I'm not going to say what that that transformation is or how it goes, but everybody who gets to the end of Liveships is like, oh my God, how could I like this character? Because this is how everybody starts. Daniel is exactly right. Everybody starts like this, going, I want to beat a child.
Yes.
That is not okay.
That's horrifying.
If I meet her, like, you just hate her so much. She's so...
Well, the first thing I would do, first of all, is I would put her in like a turtleneck and a straitjacket. Okay? You don't have it, honey.
You're not allowed. Yeah.
You're 12. You have nothing to flash at anybody, first of all. Second of all, you're 12.
Yeah.
You know nothing about the world. You know nothing. And I understand that you think that you know all of these things. And that's so heartbreaking, because when you're 12, you desperately want to prove to everyone, because you're on the path of adulthood, that you want someone to take you seriously. I totally understand that. When I was 12, I desperately wanted someone to take me seriously. So I get that. But
no, seriously, you asking, I mean, all of us who have got further along will say to you, you are not going to believe the character development in Malta. You are, and I say this with zero reservation, you are going to love Malta. From where you are now, from this level of vitriolic irritation.
I've been waiting for Malta.
You are going to get to a point when you eyeball these books at whatever point in the future, you're going to eyeball these books and be gobsmacked at how incredibly well Hobb brings you around to admiring, respecting, and fucking cheering sorry, my language,
You're
this
fine.
character, because there are definitely moments later in the series where you're going to be like, yes, go Walter.
I hope so. I genuinely do.
And you'll be astonished.
I'm the type of, I feel like I've gotten to a point as a reader where I'm open to those kind of arcs now.
Yeah.
Like I'm not, I see the potential for change, and because we want that, right? We don't want characters to stay static the entire time.
Yeah.
Because that would be super boring.
It really would. And it's not predictable either, which is also incredible. You know, there's no, oh, I'm going to go through this thing and it's going to change me, and bang, she's incredible in a moment, and that she goes through stuff.
Yeah.
And she learns, and she falls back, but she's learned, so she comes back and she becomes this person.
And that's where her
that you do cheer
her
for.
intelligence is going to serve her in that growth. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And we've been seeing everything of her potential already, but she's had nothing to do with any of it. She can't use any of it. You know, being somebody's arm piece is not in her future.
Great.
It's just not.
We love to hear that.
You know, there's just so much more to her.
Yeah.
And we do get to see that, which is wonderful. Good. You know, we get to see a great many shifts in mad ships where at the end of the Ship of Magic, we've seen this uprising on Vivacia. We've seen that now Kennet has a live ship. And we know instinctively that this is going to shift the dynamic of this story incredibly, because so much is now possible for these characters. And the ones who have had the ship taken away have nothing left to lose. So from here, well, can't get any worse. So, okay, let's move forward. And they do. And that agency from everybody is what makes the mad ship, for me, that step up, that change in tone is, okay, now we have possibilities. Now we have to make choices about what we're going to do to move forward. How are we going to get out of the shit? Because we're in the shit. Mm-hmm. How do we do that?
Right.
And it's just remarkable how that happens.
Sometimes one of the hardest lessons in life, I think, is that sometimes you have to go through a situation where something you love very deeply is taken away from you before you can grow.
Yeah. And that is what's happened at the end of Ship of Magic. This anchor piece of their family that literally all of their fortunes are attached to is taken. So they're all of them at absolute rock bottom now. Where to now for all of them? They all have to reassess, what is our family based on if it's not this live ship trading? Okay, what have we got in terms of assets? What have we got in terms of credit with our reputations with traders? What have we got? What have we got left?
Right.
And they do find that, okay, well, maybe not a lot of dollar value, but a bit like the peerage in Europe. Mm-hmm. In the technological era, is the title has value. Mm-hmm. The Vestrit name has value. They have established a reputation for honesty, for integrity, and people want to be associated with that. So now they have to assess, how do we use that? Because it's all we've got.
Right.
How do we use this to move forward? And how that works in Bingtown. And politics becomes more of a thing in Madship. The satrap becomes part of the story. We get the actual Rainwild community becomes part of the story. And we start to see a lot of the lore that we've been just tempted with. We start to get a little bit more of that. And when we bring those things all together, you start to see that all of these disparate threads have always been connected. Mm-hmm. But now you can see where they're connected and why they're connected. And you're like, oh, that's why this is part of the story. You know, that weird little ritual of tea, that has its origins because of this. Oh, okay. And these people look weird because of that. Okay. And sometimes you get, they all believe this, but none of them know why. that you just tuck away and go, oh, okay, that's obviously a bit for later. Sure enough, that's a bit for later.
Right.
But you get those associations far more once you hit Madship, which is why I'm...
What is your diagnosis, Derri?
I actually will say I'm going to Cliff Notes the first probably half of Madship for you, because Wintro still has a way to go. And if he's the most confronting in terms of gaslighting and manipulation, then that's going to continue to be a problem.
That's what I
for
was...
at least a little while. So if I Cliff Notes the chapters for you in Madship, once we get past that point, I'll be able to say to you, you should be okay from whatever chapter. And then you go from the little chapter snippets that I've given you into, I'll try an actual chapter.
See how it goes.
No, okay, go back to the snippets.
Right.
But I don't think that the first half of that book would work for you. There's still too much happening in Wintrow's view of the world. And that could be too much. So that's where I'm going to go.
Because he needed more to happen to him, for sure.
And he does have a lot to go through.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a problem while he was on Vivacia under Kyle. Now he's on Vivacia under Kenneth. So we're going from one level of villain to another, both of whom are very good at gaslighting and manipulation. So, yeah, that's not going to be
you said that in my whole, I was just like, no.
That's not going to go well for you to start with.
No.
There does come a point where that will shift, and that's the point at which I'll say, try this chapter. This should be good with this chapter. Go until you can't, and then we'll go back to bits. Because there's definitely elements in Madship that you are really going to get a lot of value from.
Yeah.
In terms of character growth and development and story.
Yeah.
That I would hate for you to miss out on because of this one element that is just too much.
The whole book.
Pretty much.
Too much. The whole thing's too much.
Yeah. I'll save the chapters. I'll highlight the chapters for myself where good stuff happens. Say, okay, Tori can read that chapter. And you can get to have some of the good moments.
You know, if they just sit down and have tea on the beach, like, that's great. That's great. Which, again, it's so funny because this book, like, it really forced me to articulate what kind of emotional impact I appreciate versus what kind of emotional impact I don't enjoy reading, because my most deeply held beloved stories have ripped my heart out, every single one of them, and I love that feeling. But to me, emotional impact and emotional burnout are not the same thing.
No, they're not. And the whole point of reading is, and to my mind, is to finish a book going, I'm glad I read that.
Right.
And I would hate to think anybody finished a Hobb book going, thank fuck, that's over. I don't want people to think that. It breaks my heart.
I literally said that out loud to my husband.
My heart.
When I finished Ship of Magic, I said, I am so glad I'm done with this book.
Yes. And that breaks my heart. It absolutely breaks my heart because it is so anti what I want people to get from any book that they're reading, let alone one that I adore.
Yeah.
And it's just what it is. And I'm going to just quickly jump back because you mentioned tea on the beach and Kenneth losing a leg. When he breaks one of the baubles in front of the other says to him, the sea will take back that which you have stolen. That's the leg he loses to the serpent. And I like that kind of cleverness.
I do. I was not mad at all. I was like,
I loved that he lost a leg.
I was like, you could have taken the whole dude.
Yeah.
That would have been better.
Right. Yeah, it really would have.
Yeah, it would have been great. Because, so many
not
things.
A nice person. Just not a nice person. And we will get there. We will get you there. We will get you through what of the story you need to go into Tawny Man, and then you can just enjoy Tawny Man.
Yeah.
Because going back to Fitz is amazing. And Fool's Errand, book 1 of Tawny Man, is my absolute favourite book of the whole series.
Ooh.
I adore Fool's Errand. I adore it so much that I want you to have that feeling of enjoyment when you read Hobb.
I mean, I'm going to be
really
voxering you like crazy when I'm reading new Hobb books. Well, so this will make you happy, Derri. So despite the experience that I had with Ship of Magic and my trepidation on what I was going to do with that particular trilogy, after I finished Ship of Magic, I still went out and bought paperback versions of Tawny Man.
Good.
So
that does in fact make me happy.
Yes. So and I actually also was about halfway through Madship when I bought those.
Ooh, nice.
So I own them.
Yeah.
And
so
it's
now a sunken cost thing where you've bought them, so eventually you're going to have to read them. So you know,
I'm just pretending
the day will come.
I'm pretending I don't know where the Barnes and Noble receipt is. Because I was tempted twice. I almost took them back.
I don't. I don't blame you, because that is a strong reaction.
Yeah.
What I will promise you is you will get to a point where the day will come, you will eyeball them, and you will get a different experience.
Yeah.
And I very much hope that for you, because it truly hurts my heart that affected you so deeply. Because and here's the thing, is that Anita had a very similar reaction, but not until Ship of Destiny.
Yes.
And that devastated me. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry that you've had that reaction to this book.
Yeah.
I mean, she was amazingly brave, and she continued and was okay to continue, and that was all fine. But that she had such a negative reaction to books that I love so much really upset me. Not because oh my God, she's wrong, but because I didn't want her to have that reaction. And that she did was really upsetting, because I don't want people to be hurt by these stories.
There's been a couple of times for, like there's House of Chains, book 4 of Malazan. In the beginning of the book is like 300 pages of some of the worst, most awful stuff. Like everything horrible that a person can do, a character does. And it's very heavy. And I have told so many people who come off of Memories of Ice, and they're just like kind of feeling that a little bit of that emotional burnout. I'm like, wait to read, because House of Chains is, and they're like, well, I've read Dead House. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The beginning of House of Chains, like you take
it's a whole nother thing.
It's a whole different level. So I like, part of that's just, knowing that every person is going to have, you can't predict what kind of like I was shocked at my reaction to this.
Exactly, because so many of the elements
didn't know.
are things that you do enjoy.
Yes.
And are things that you look for in stories.
Exactly.
And again, I'm going to call it a win, because she just did it too good. It was just too good that you couldn't escape it. And, that will ease with time. Yeah. And eventually you will be able to eyeball it and be able to move past that. And you'll get the full value of the trilogy. Right. Until then, I am more than happy to chapter bite it for you and ensure you get into Tawny Man ready to be in love again with Hobb. Yeah, because I want you to be in love with Hobb.
I'm hopeful for that. I'm really looking forward to Tawny Man. I respect Hobb at this point, but she hurt me and I'm mad at her.
And fair enough. The woman can hurt you like no one else.
100%.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I've gone through periods with other authers where I was like, I'm not speaking to you right now.
Oh yeah. I've had those moments where I'm like, I'm not even.
I can't even with you right now.
Yeah. And put it back on the shelf in shame. Like, how dare you?
How dare.
I've definitely had those moments. So I get it, and it's perfectly valid, and you are more than allowed. And hopefully we'll get you into Tawny Man in the not too distant future.
Yes.
So we'll get there.
Well, did we get through? I think we got through pretty much all the characters.
I think the ones that are relevant for now. Yeah. I mean, not like we're not going to talk again.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciate you being willing to spend almost 3 hours unpacking all of this with me.
I love these books. I just love them. And I want other people to love them. So if just talking about them helps, I'm going to talk at you as long as it takes, because I want you to love them. And I'm not going to force you to read books that I don't think you're going to love.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I appreciate that.
That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
So,
the Hobb fans, not fandom, but the Hobb fans are lucky to have you in their midst, Derri. So
thank you.
Totally agree, Ben. You know, it's always one of my favorite things is, and why I love doing live streams, is seeing other people talk about things that bring them so much passion into their lives. And Derri, obviously, the series is a huge passion point for you.
It's a big thing for me.
And that's a big thing. It's beautiful to watch that. I love listening to you, because I love psychoanalyzing my favorite characters, and hearing you do it so passionately and so eloquently is just such a gift to be able to have conversations like that.
Thank you.
So
and again, just thank you for your input, because it's just as important. You know, don't undersell yourself. It is absolutely as important.
Thank you.
As someone who's read it as many times as I have. Because more people are going to only read it one time. Right. They're going to read it a stupid number of times. So, you know, keep that in mind.
Passionate number of times.
Yes. Irrational, possibly hospitalization worthy. But anyway, I shall now sort of, because I don't even know what time it is where you are, but we've been going a while, so I'm guessing it's getting quite late.
It's 9:45 in the evening.
Which means I've had you miss your kids' bedtime. Sorry.
It's okay. I spend lots of time with them. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and they're homeschooled, so we spend lots of time together during the day. And
but still,
I will love on them tomorrow.
Yeah, and you have a husband who is a gem, apparently, so you should probably spend some time with him.
Yes.
So. Well, I should let you go.
Thank you so much, everyone in the chat, for hanging out with us. If you're watching the replay,
absolutely.
Thank you. I hope, please let us know down in the chat below, or the comments below, your experience with the books and what you thought of the conversation. If you have anything to add. Also, I should have said this at the beginning, and I totally forgot. You should go down in the description box below and click Derri's link to her channel and subscribe, because that is also down there. So go check out her channel, which has literally everything you could ever want in terms of Hobb content, and more coming every day. Yes. So if you are looking for more Hobb content, there is no better place to go than Derri's channel. So
kind of. So
thank you, Derri.
Lovely weekends.
Bye, everybody.